The morning light over Meereen was the color of half-quenched bronze, a band of slow brightening shimmer lying across the eastern horizon, as though the day itself were reluctant to begin. Jorah Mormont felt its warmth on the raw skin of his cheek, where the grayscale scar lifted in jagged relief, a reminder of pain endured and debts unpaid. From the terrace atop the Great Pyramid, the breath of the city lay beneath him like a tattered cloak. Broken harbors, mended walls, the bite of soot hanging above the brickwork. Yet there was motion, everywhere motion. Sails being hauled to wind, fishmongers crying over still flopping catch, unsullied files tracing pale silver angles through the maze of streets. Unsullied files tracing pale silver angles through the maze. Dawn in Meereen had a rhythm now, a shape that belonged to Daenerys Stormborn. He thought of her by that name more often than the titles the world had begun to chant: Breaker of Chains, Mother of Dragons, Khaleesi of the Great Grass Sea. For it was in the storm that she had first drawn breath, and in storm, since that she had lived. Rare was the day when some fresh gale did not rise about her, and rarer still that she fled from it. Jorah's loyalty, once a trampled blossom at her feet, had sprouted anew. Yet the fear of failing her again clung like hidden mold to the roots of his heart. The pyramid's carved lions the Giscari had set here centuries past crouched on either side of him. Their obsidian eyes seemed to smolder in the climbing light. He rested a mailed hand on one flank, feeling the chill of stone seep under leather. Is that not what I have become? He wondered. A guardian cut from something dead, pretending to breathe. But when the southern wind came, he caught dragon scent. Warm ash, sun-boiled hide, and an aftertaste of scorched marrow that no pyromancer's art could mimic. Drogon must be circling high above. They were never far from her, not now. Footsteps, a soft scuff of sandals. Nisande of Eneth emerged from the stairmouth, her dawn-gray robe cinched by a belt of knotted gold thread. Even so early she carried a ledger clasped to her breast. Ser Jorah, she greeted, inclining her head. At 15 she moved with the stillness of a learned scribe twice her years. The Queen requests your presence in the audience hall. Before the first bell, Her Grace has not slept. Nisandai's large eyes flicked toward the pale horizon, as if measuring how far dawn must climb before the next trouble began. The emissaries from Korth arrived in the night. Ships from Volantis 2 days behind, and the Estepori delegation presses for reply. Jorah lifted his fur-lined cloak from the bastion's rail. He donned it one-armed, the other lost in memory to a bear's head pauldron long ago abandoned on some Dothraki plain. Tell her I am coming. He descended narrow steps slick with night moisture, finding at each landing a still unknown. Grim unsullied at their posts, shaved heads reflecting torch glow, freedmen scribes unfolding benches, Dothraki bloodriders yawning wide as lions. 4 years ago, Meereen's own masters would have filled these galleries with blue harpy standards and pleas for the whip. Now the walls were bare, save the ring scars where chains had hung. Change, Jorah mused, was a living creature. It stank, bled bright, and howled when cornered. In the audience hall, Daenerys Targaryen stood before a map of the narrow sea painted floor to ceiling in shards of lapis and jade. Torchlight dappled the straits of Valyria like copper coins hurled upon water. She wore no crown this hour, only a riding jerkin of black leather sewn with threads of cloth of silver. White hair fell in 3 simple braids down her back. A 4th unfinished braid hung loose, the sign of something incomplete. Perhaps a victory not yet won, perhaps a grief not yet laid to rest. Tyrion Lannister had once teased court with such affectations, though he was nowhere in sight now. She turned, reading his arrival without hearing him. Her violet eyes, tired as moonstones left in sand, sharpened. You walk the walls at dusk, and again at dawn. Does Meereen appear ready to weather the next storm? Or have you come to warn me of fresh cracks? Jorah bowed low. The grayscale scar protested, pulling taut where cheek met beard. Every storm I see I measure against you. Sea, sand, or steel, none reach higher than the dragons. Meereen stands. Words that warm as quilted wool, she answered, moving to the main table where a kettle steamed beside clusters of thin parchment. But wool burns. She poured him tea unbidden. Read these. The top sheet bore the sigil of Korth, a stylized door of midnight lacquer. Their envoy begged succor. Pirates of the Stepstones raided the Jade Gates. Silk flows choked, spice convoys vanished. The second scroll, Astapori, dripped honeyed threats, reopened slave markets, or watched Cascari gold pivot to Volantis. The last, penned in an elegant slant, arrived from one Illyrium Opatus across the sea. He wrote of Westeros stirring like an ant's nest under heel. Queen Cersei had suffered 2 defeats yet woven fresh alliances. Euron Greyjoy marauded the Reach. Winter eclipsed the Neck. They test me, Daenerys said. Merchants, monarchs, and butcher kings alike. They taste my blood from afar, then show them the metal of the cup. Jorah replied. Cut their tongues on the rim. She studied him. When last you offered counsel, you bade me release slaves, trade harshness for mercy, fetch with carrot rather than lash. Now you ask steel. I ask balance, your grace. A rider shifts weight as the horse leaps. The pace changes, the seat holds, kindness in victory, ferocity in threat. Silence passed like a third presence between them. He tasted the tea's smoke and cinnamon, letting it anchor him. Daenerys' eyes were on the unfinished braid over her shoulder. Without turning, she called, a single word in Valyrian, and Grey Worm emerged from behind a pillar, dragging a prisoner. The man's purple cloak and golden necklace announced him a prince of New Gis. Yet the cloak was singed, and the necklace's interlocking harpies had fused into shapeless lumps. Spoke of alliance, Daenerys explained. He would bring me Astapor's coins and Yunkai shipyards. If only I crown him king of Meereen and promise the return of property too long misplaced. I said I would consider. Jorah's hand found the pommel of his blade of its own accord. The prisoner's knees buckled, though Grey Worm gave no tug. Have you considered? Jorah asked softly. I have decided. Yet I wish the hand beside me when sentence falls. The hand. The word shivered through him, though she voiced it casually. Weeks passed on a windless night she had tested. If fire can destroy infection without devouring the flesh, might it cleanse betrayal without devouring trust? Tyrion's missteps at Moiraine's walls lay heavy. Ships burned, siege unstable, allies unpaid. Ser Barristan was dead. His Darzo Lorak fled, Dario across the sea. She had faced the vacancy where an arm of council should be, and in the stillness laid a scarred palm over Jorah's. You were once my betrayer, she had whispered. Yet you became my shield, before I knew I needed shielding. Be my hand now, and never draw that hand away. He had sworn on the bones of Bear Island. But pledge was easy. Practice was teeth. Grey Worm forced the Giscari onto both knees. The man wheezed, a puff of ash curling from his beard stubble. Daenerys advanced. I will not return men and women to chains, she told him in Giscari. I will not carve a crown to adorn a slaver's brow. Go back to your masters and tell them the dragon's daughter sings no song that ends at their fires. Grey Worm's pale spear pivoted, but Jorah raised a gloved hand. When the Unsullied halted, perplexity flashing in hard-trained eyes, Jorah met Daenerys' gaze. Mercy and victory, he murmured. A sharp breath escaped her. Then she nodded. To show them the balance, she said, finishing his earlier thought. Grey Worm, release him beyond the south gate. He walks home with only his breath and his fear of losing it. Mentax. The Giscari quivered, disbelief and relief roiling like twin vipers. Grey Worm obeyed, silent as water. When they were gone, Daenerys drew closer to Jorah until he smelled the leather oil on her jerkin, saw in candle glow how silver hair framed the uncompromising lines of her jaw. He will live, she said. But his masters will hear that the hand counseled mercy. They will wonder if mercy is weakness. Then let them wonder until fear and hope weigh equal. A people living in uncertainty hesitate to strike. Nay, nay, nay. Across the hall, torches spat resin. Their reflections wavered on the map, bright across the narrow sea. To the left, at the edge of charted crags, lay Westeros, almost an afterthought of fractured coastline, Yet in her eyes, it was the world entire. "Tonight we hold council," she told him. "Tyrion shall attend, though his voice will not rule. I want every fleet master, unsullied commander, healer, and quartermaster. We sail west within the moon's turn, or Meereen will drown us in petitions." "Bane?" Jorah inclined his head, though worry gnawed. To uproot now meant supply lines stretched thin, hostages of weather and chance. Yet to linger meant soft decay. "Within the moon's turn," he echoed. "I will speak with Anatha scribes, update manifests." Her hand grazed his forearm, the briefest touch yet weighty as chain. "Come to the rookery when quills fall silent," she said. "There is a letter I would send north, and I trust no other hand." When Jorah withdrew, dawn had broken fully. Outside the pyramid a causeway bustled with mule carts hauling honeyed wine, camels bearing slate for new roads, barrels of goat milk destined for children's bowls. A city fed, sheltered, and taught by decree of one woman. A woman who yet had more to claim. He watched it all, the smallness and greatness blurred, and felt again the answer forming inside him like a living seed. If duty asked that he carry the cry of dragons across ocean and battlefield alike, then Bear Island's son would answer, scarred though he was. He found Tyrion Lannister in the shade of a silk pavilion pitched beside the citadel stairs. The dwarf lounged on a cushioned bench, ink-blotted scroll unspooled across his knees, goblet of fermented persimmon at hand, though the hour was scarcely past dawn. A cluster of Braavosi advisors murmured nearby, noses buried in ledgers. Tyrion's sharp eyes followed Jorah's approach with wary amusement. "I trust the sunrise patrol affords more excitement than the migrant birdwatching you assign me," Tyrion drawled. "I fear I have studied every cormorant and seagull to grace these rooftops. Their conversations are sadly repetitive. No inatoire." "You remain alive to complain," Jorah offered. "An improvement over last year." "Alive, yes, and yet never so near to being fed to dragons. Your queen contemplates my many virtues on one scale and my recent blunders on another. The scales appear to match unsatisfyingly." Jorah crossed arms. "The queen values you still, else you would share company with our Giscari friend on a road south." Tyrion sighed, rolling the scroll. "I've begun to suspect the realm itself is a scroll. One vast, creased parchment that will not stay flat long enough to read. Daenerys means to sail soon." "Then, moon's turn." Jorah studied the dwarf's expression but detected only weary candor. "Sooner if Yunkai stirs. Then let us pray to every god inclined toward weather, that the straits remain passable." Tyrion's smile lifted one corner. "Tell me, Sir Knight of the scarred cheek, do you remember the Reach? My memory of Westeros is sharpened by exile." Jorah replied, though dulled by longing. "Why?" "Because winter is said to press even there. Snow on Old Town's gardens, mists freezing along the Mander. Ships from the Arbor speak of wines souring in casks. If half of what they claim is true, the realm you return to may scarcely resemble the one you left." "Done? I left dishonored, and in debt to Braavos," Jorah said. "That realm I welcome no more. A new realm rises behind the dragon's wings." The dwarf toasted him with persimmon wine. "To new realms, and to living long enough to quarrel over them." By sundown the throne chamber, once the private wine garden of Meereen's great masters, had been remade as council hall. Silk awnings diffused torch glare. Ashwood trestle tables formed a crescent around a central dais where Daenerys stood. The dragons were absent from the hall, though their absence was a presence itself. The floor mosaic still bore talon scars, and the air carried faint brimwood tang. Jorah, aglow with lamplight, unfurled a weather chart for the Bay of Dragons. "Prevailing northeasterlies for 12 days, he explained, pointing to colored arcs E. "Enough to push us past Valyria before the currents turn. The fleet's warships, slim hulls gifted by Qarth, thick-ribbed volantine triremes seized in battle, and a dozen patched bay vessels, could muster 34. Add in grain ships and tenders, and the armada swelled near 50. A healer from Lhazar spoke next, her low voice cataloging poultices, dried goat lung, fresh distilled spirit. An unsullied quartermaster recounted spear counts, shield repairs, tallow for armor straps. Missandei announced grain stores adequate for 6 weeks at sea, 4 if sailings delayed. At last Tyrion stepped forward. He wore black doublet trimmed in crimson and carried a short rod of ironwood. His speech wove through finance, loans uncollected in Qarth, debts to the Iron Bank that might be leveraged once King's Landing fell. He urged caution, for the fleet might encounter Euron's reavers beyond the stepstones. Our queen must choose between speed and caution, he concluded. If passage risks ambush, slower course invites storm. Daenerys listened, her gaze roving from map to men to the unlit horizon glimpsed through high windows. When all had spoken, she raised a gloved hand. Ser Jorah, Hand of the Queen, speak. The title fell into the hush like a stone into still water. Jorah felt every eye pivot. He straightened, recalling the night of his naming. A simple gold and iron brooch, a bear's head clutching a 3-headed dragon, pinned at his breast. Now he placed both palms on the table and let breath steady him. We chase many winds, he began. Enemies ride some, allies others. But there is one wind we must outrun always, time. Our enemies multiply as rumors sail swifter than fleets. If we tarry here, Qarth fails, Volantis wavers, the Giscari strike. If we rush blind, Euron bars the stepstones. Yet the same straits can be our sheath. Imagine 34 warships, silent under cover of darkness, hugging the smoking sea's warm currents. Let Euron guard the northern lanes while we slip south, then break north in Westeros lee during a gale. Winter's storm becomes our cloak. Bannersinad. Tyrion arched a brow. A clever cloak can still strangle if it tangles round the throat. Thus the dragons? Jorah answered simply. 3 fires to burn the knots. Grey Worm's stoic profile twitched in what passed for approval. The other commanders exchanged looks. Daenerys uplifted chin. The hand speaks well, she said. Within 7 days the fleet will wait anchor. Until then, every spearhead honed, every cask sealed. Tyrion drafts supply lists for Castle Black and White Harbor. If the North holds, it must hold for us. She lifted the iron rod from Tyrion's hand, a ceremonial baton long ago used by Giscari generals, then offered it across the table to Jorah. He hesitated before closing scarred fingers around it. The rod felt heavy, warmer than iron had right to be, as though it remembered every battle command spoken through the centuries. Bear it, Daenerys murmured. Tonight you call the watch. I will draft letters. Nan. Night swallowed Meereen in rings of murmuring shadow. Tavern laughter, fish oil lamps, distant forges. Jorah mounted the rookery stairs 2 at a time, finding Daenerys alone beside the highest window. A parchment lay on the sill, half-written. The scent of lamp oil and salted wind mingled. No dragons perched here. Only the roost's pigeons shifting in straw. He approached quietly. She did not turn. What words for the north? He asked. That winter has swallowed the sun, she answered. And the sun must light from within. She dipped quill in inkstone. Whom do I address? Jon Snow. He was crowned king in the north, yet letters name Sansa Stark as regent while he rides abroad. Write to them both, Jorah advised. And to Samwell Tarly at Oldtown. He cured my grayscale. He merits warning. Daenerys nodded, setting quill to vellum anew. Memory of that cure. Flames of agony as Sam scraped suppurating stone flesh from his chest, bloomed like ghost heat in Jorah's mind. He banished it. Across the sill, lamplight gilded her profile. Strength etched in softness. A warrior's patience coiled behind diplomat's poise. Minutes passed, only quill scratching, waves distant. Jorah's eyes traced the city below, a lattice of orange torch pinpoints. How many still plot to return chains to wrists? He wondered aloud. Enough, she whispered. Enough that my dragons must guard every breath. She set quill aside, flexing cramped fingers. Do you ever tire of vigilance, Ser Jorah? Tire? Yes. Relent? No. The day I cease to watch shall be the day my eyes close for good. She smiled faintly. Even hands must rest. Go. Sleep before dawn hunts us again. As you command. He bowed. Yet, as he reached the staircase, her voice called one last time. Bear, she said. The old Dothraki name she'd once teased him with. I am glad you returned to me. Jorah descended with the warmth of that sentence sealing cracks inside him he had not known lay open. Outside the pyramid, torch brackets flared where Unsullied patrolled. He inhaled the copper tang of their oiled helms, the citric note of salt pork smoking nearby, the far sweet drift of straw as freedmen penned horses. Each breath belonged to this living city, and soon to the realm beyond the sea. 7 days later, the harbor thrummed as though a giant heart beat beneath its waters. Mass-scraped sky, rigging creaked, gulls shrieked over crates of onions, and sacks of barley heaved along gangplanks. Unsullied in column, marched onto the thunder's roar. Bronze masks of roaring lions reflecting sunlight. Elsewhere Dothraki guided skittish horses up hollow ramps into hold pens, their laughter rising when the beasts neighed. Jorah strode the pier. The ironwood rod of office slanted across his spine. Dockmasters saluted. Freedmen wives offered bowls of rice and date truffles. He returned nods, murmured thanks, and continued, checking mooring knots, counting casks, tightening chain loops on ballistae pivot mounts. Mid-pier he halted at a ship not of marine. Slim-keeled. Sails dyed a red so dark they seemed black in shadow. The prow carved into twin dragons entwined. Stepping from gangplank came Yara Greyjoy, lean in boiled leather, hair bound in a sailor's tail. She grinned at Jorah's surprise. Thought you'd sail without ironborn eyes on the wind? She asked. Your queen will need one of our island tricks to slip Euron's nets. Your loyalty was to Theon, Jorah reminded, though he offered a hand. To freedom from my uncle's madness, she corrected, shaking firmly. And your queen's coin. She surveyed the bay with a hawk's fast sweep. Euron's bent every longship between Pike and the Sunset Sea to his keel, yet he cannot watch all tides. We punch through south of Valyria under storm cover. Trust me. I know the squall he fears. He does not fear storms, Jorah said. Only calm that hides teeth beneath glassy sea. Yara chuckled. Then let's sharpen our teeth. At midday, the war fleet cast off. Great ropes snapped free. Drums thundered. 3 black wings wheeled overhead, Drogon first, then Regal, then Viserion, casting moving shadows across sails that billowed like the lungs of some colossal sea-born beast. On the flagship's quarterdeck Daenerys stood in a breastplate of dragon-scale leather, wind-fretting silver hair loose behind. At her right hand, Jorah leaned into the salt gust, feeling the deck heel, hearing timbers groan. Below, sailors chanted Valyrian sailing hymns to keep rope hands flying swift. They cleared the harbor mouth. Meereen's pyramid shrank behind, each step of sandstone dimming under lengthening afternoon. Jorah watched until the city merged with desert haze, knowing he might never see it again. If they succeeded, Westeros awaited. If they failed, bones would float beneath this sea. Either way, the page turned. Daenerys approached the rail where he stood. Her voice came low under wind's roar. You spoke once of my enemies multiplying like storms. Will we weather them? Storms break on rock, he replied. You are dragonfire on stone and water both. She fell silent a breath, then touched his arm. 5,000 souls on these decks place faith in those words. Then let us make them truth. He gazed forward. In the west, the sky bruised violet where clouds massed. Winter's hemline stepped far south. There, somewhere beyond the horizon, the first real test of a hand's metal waited. Jorah adjusted grip on the ironwood rod, feeling its grain warm beneath touch, and suspected his scars might yet glow with their own inner coal. As Meereen disappeared, he murmured the bear's old prayer beneath breath. May the lives I guard outnumber the regrets I carry. By the third night, the fleet skirted Valyria's smoking isles. Sulfur fumes drifted over star-dimpled water, and distant red sparks winked on cliff edges like embers from a giant's forge. Few sailors dared whisper in that gloom. Calms so deep the sea mirrored the moons were broken only by the well-sung groan of timbers. Jorah walked the upper deck while most slept. Fingers of mist licked rails. The hiss of water parted by hull rose like a slow chant. Footfalls behind startled him. Tyrion, wrapped in a bearskin cloak much too large, balancing a wineskin. "Can't sleep," the dwarf confessed. "Noxious fumes play hell with my delicate lungs. Or perhaps my conscience." He offered the skin. Jorah sipped, plum wine heavy with spice. "Your conscience never lacked voice." "Ah, but its arguments grow more pointed. Do you ever fear your own queen?" Jorah considered the dark swirl where water met sky. "I fear failing her, and I fear what rises when the world conspires to make her a monster." Tyrion nodded as if expecting no less. "I said once that every time a Targaryen is born, the gods flip a coin. But coins land on edges too, balancing impossible. She stands on such an edge. You perhaps alone might keep her from tipping." Jorah closed the wineskin, set it upon a coil of rope. "Not alone. If you believe your counsel worthless, she will believe it. If you measure your worth only against failure, you forge failures." Tyrion's laugh came like a cracked bell. "You're kinder than I recall. The sea smooths sharp stones, or wears them to nothing." He peered toward the far black silhouette of another ship. "I do hope we live to finish this conversation in a brothel in King's Landing." "I am barred from brothels," Jorah said grimly. "Then the conversation shall occur in a library, dusty and respectable." Tyrion raised an imaginary goblet. "May we reach that respectable dust." They parted at mastfoot. Jorah climbed to the crow's nest, needing solitary watch. From that height, open ocean sprawled unbound. Moonlit swells cresting like marching silver wolves toward Valyria's ruin. He tried to picture Westeros after so long. Gulls at White Harbor, the cracked pillars of Harrenhal, bare islands, black pines bending under snow. Would his father's halls remember his dishonor or his redemption? Would they know him at all? Below, a faint roar split the night. Drogon exhaling far aft, a flash of red flickering. The dragon's presence anchored him. Where that fire shone, Daenerys lived. Where Daenerys lived, purpose endured. He wrapped his cloak tighter, letting cold salt air prick eyes open. 5 hours until dawn. 5 hours to weigh storms yet unborn. He took each moment and stacked it like a stone in an unseen wall, building a bulwark around his queen. Thus he kept vigil, hand of the queen under a sky that smelled of fire and stories yet unwritten, while far off the currents whispered of war, betrayal, and the forging of realms in dragonflame. In Ka, the night silence fractured beneath a distant crack. A whale's exhalation or the angry cough of Valyria herself. Then knitted together again, leaving Jorah Mormont in the crow's nest with only the wheeze of rigging and the low hush of an unquiet sea. He marked 3 heartbeats, 4, 5, until nothing but the throb of blood behind his ears remained. Somewhere down on the quarterdeck, the watch changed. A lantern swung, painting brief rings of mellow gold across the dark expanse of waves before its flame was hooded. The smell of pitch and salt carried upward, mingling with faint whirls of brimstone that drifted from the east where the smoking sea glimmered like dull iron in the moonlight. Hours ticked by. Above him, stars wheeled. Below, the armada labored forward. Rotating watchmen called to one another softly in Valyrian, in the liquid vowels of the summer isles, in the clipped fisherman's cant of the basilisk coast. Jorah let the languages blend into a single quiet murmur that fit itself to the slap of water under the hull. Those small human sounds reassured him in a way the vastness of the sky could not. Just before dawn's first gauze touched the eastern rim, movement in the darkness flickered at the edge of peripheral sight. He blinked, leaned over the rim of the basket, and waited. There, a smudge upon the water where no smudge ought to be. The shape dissolved, reformed, then vanished behind the uneven hump of a gentle swell. He held his breath, counting the scrape of his pulse. Again the blot appeared, closer now, too angular to be flotsam. A single mast. Another. Lanthorn glass winked green, then black. Shadow-bound sails. Riders in the night. The throat of the bell at the mast foot yawned below him, but Jorah did not ring it, not yet. Instead, he let one steady exhale escape, measured the distance by eye, and tasted the wind. A breeze blew faintly off their starboard quarter, carrying their convoy west-northwest. Yet the strangers crept from the south on an oblique line that would intercept the rearmost grain ships. 5, 6, no, 7 hulls at least, sloop lean, built for rapine over cargo. A wolf could smell another wolf even wrapped in lambskins. The slow gait, sails reefed to thumb width, was a hunter's gait. He descended the ratlines fast and silent, boots biting hemp. The deck lay hushed, dotted by shapes of sleeping sailors curled against bulwarks. Only the night crew stirred, checking lines, trimming the sails. Jorah found Grey Worm near the steering oar, conferring with the helmsman. He pointed once into the east, and the vessel eased half a degree. Almost imperceptible. 7 sails astern. Jorah said low. Painted dark, running without signal lights save one green lantern cloaked half the time. Grey Worm's spear butt thudded once against deck plank, his version of a curse. They search for our stragglers. Or test our vigil. You saw colors? None. Grey Worm considered. Though his face remained stone, his eyes mapped calculations as swift as any sellsword's tally board. We call dragons? Not yet. Let the queen sleep until we know we're bitten. Nepiksa. Grey Worm signaled 2 unsullied. They glided aft, shields hugged tight to gray tunics. A low drone rose, rigging blocks squealing as the watch hauled at braces. Sails bellied, nudging the flagship half a knot faster. Across the water, other shipmasters caught the change and answered, some with crisp professionalism, others with annoyed shouts rousing crew from hammocks. In minutes the convoy stretched out like a taut bowstring. The pre-dawn sliver widened, swells smooth, throwing faint reflections. Now Jorah perceived the strangers more clearly. Ram-proud. Decks stripped to bare planking. Oars stacked but not shipped. Iron-borne reaver marks. Yet the masts were stepped lower than traditional longships, allowing less canvas, but better concealment against a night horizon. Yara's people or Euron's? The sigils would tell soon enough. From the companionway Tyrion emerged swaddled in cloak, his face a mask of cranky fatigue. Can a dwarf enjoy one dreamless hour at sea without your damned bells? He snapped. Then saw Grey Worm's rigid posture, Jorah's squared shoulders, and his complaint died. What have we? Guests, Jorah said. Uninvited. Tyrion peered over the rail, squinting. Even rats grow bold when they smell grain. Aft, the last grain galleass lagged. Not by sloth, but because its hull wallowed heavier, packs of flour-absorbing brine. Jorah's gaze cut to Grey Worm. The commander nodded and strode toward the windward ballista station. Voice clipped as he ordered the crew to prime the torsion arms. Lever bars creaked, rope sinews wound, quarrels big as young trees lifted into grooves. The strangers fanned, 6 splitting wide while the 7th remained central. Small triangular pennants caught the first gold streaks of morning, black on crimson, a squid of the Iron Isles, but crowned with a tangle of bone-white thorns. Euron. A horn moaned on the rearmost raider, low as a plague cow. Oars unfolded. In a heartbeat, the peaceful drift changed to surging wake, knife-like hulls splitting gray water. By reflex, Jorah's hand found his sword hilt, though no boarders would reach this deck for long minutes. Battle to quarters, he barked. This time the bell rang, once, twice, clanging through the fleet. Lamps blossomed. Boots hammered deckboards. Crossbowmen scrambled up ratlines, tying themselves into top nests. Drummers boomed the assembly. Screeches answered from above. 3 shapes plummeting out of cloud, black wings and ember eyes. Drogon first, Rhaegal second, Viserion third. Daenerys had wakened instantly when the bell tolled. No throne chamber, no courtiers. She rode Drogon's neck in black leathers, white hair whipping behind like a triumphant banner. Every soldier on every deck roared at the sight. Flame jetted from Drogon's maw, searing the air 30 yards above the flagship. A warning arc to show foe and fleet alike that the dragons were anchored with them. Smoke trailed. The ship rolled in the heat gust. Euron's reavers did not turn away. Their war horns brayed in manic counter-music. Grapnel ballistas elevated. Wicked three-pronged heads gleamed. Shields glared with bits of mirror set into rawhide, meant to flash dragonfire back in blind, scaly eyes. Daenerys banked. Drogon climbing. Jorah watched her silhouette framed against a newborn sun, and every mortal dread he owned tried to rise, remembering tales of scorpion bolts punching through dragon scale. Yet the Ironborn were still out of effective range. Only the first harpoons loosed would cross the distance, and those would meet a sky swirling with 3 agitated dragons, not one. Grey Worm's ballista crew let fly. The heavy iron shaft screamed across 200 fathoms and speared the prow shield of the nearest raider. Wood burst. Men flew back in sprays of splinter shards. Jorah muttered a prayer and willed the grain ship to run. Sailors on its deck flung spare canvas over the sides, forming makeshift fenders, while slingers lined its rails. Sudden brightness exploded starboard. Rhaegal's fire kissed an onrushing longship broadside. Green-gold flame blossomed, hungry as fever. Tarred planks turned instant furnace. Men shrieked, rolling into sea that steamed. Yet beyond that inferno, 3 raiders pressed on, steering by madness or Euron's threat. Drogon stooped. Jorah forgot to breathe. The big dragon's belly scales rippled, wings half-folded. He arrowed downward, jaws parting. Flame did not erupt, claws did. Drogon seized the central raider's mast, shearing it like reed grass, and pitched the entire spar into the ocean. Decks buckled, tangle of sail imprisoned half the crew. Drogon veered off in a rip of wind. Black pinpricks sprang from the ironborn decks, crossbow bolts, quarrels with barbed rope tails trailing behind. Most fell short, or else clattered from scales. One lodged above Drogon's hip. The great beast's roar shook nearby rigging. Daenerys twisted, eyes scanning the bolt, searching for mortal hurt. Satisfied it found no soft joint, she patted Drogon's neck and pulled the reins of thought only a rider and dragon share. Drogon wheeled to finish the crippled ship, but Jorah saw a new threat. From the second straight of approaching hulls, a scorpion ballista the length of a cart lay ready. Atop it stood a figure in indigo-oiled coat, long dark hair whipping. A patch on one eye. Euron Greyjoy. He raised a horn in salute, then yanked the release lever. The giant bolt streaked upward, trailing rope thick as an anchor chain. For 3 heartbeats, Jorah could do nothing but watch. Drogon banked left, but momentum from the dive limited how sharply he could turn. The missile kept a true line for the joint where wing sank into body. Daenerys saw it, shouted unheard, above wind. Drogon pumped both wings once, guttural roar vibrating timbers. The bolt's iron head grazed the membrane with a faint tearing rip. Skin, not muscle, and whizzed skyward into empty air. The rope snapped off in slack coils. On the quarterdeck, Tyrion swore a prayer neither father nor mother would endorse. Grey Worm swung the ballista toward Euron's ship. He voiced an order. Quarrel loosed. The bolt slammed the ironborn scorpion shield, embedding deep into its frame and spoiling the reload pivot. Crew scrambled. Euron barked a laugh, clapping the helmsman's shoulder as though the near miss amused him. Behind, 2 other raiders streaked for the grain vessel, grapnels flying. Hooks bit wood. Lines pulled taut. Jorah sprinted to the rail. "Boarding party," he hollered at the closest marine unit. Freedmen spearmen under a Giscari veteran named Cavalcillo. They hurled narrow gangplanks over the side, lashing them to grapnels thrown by their own sailors, until a crazy, bouncing bridge spanned 50 feet of choppy sea between flagship and grain carrier. Cavo's men poured across. 1 dragon overhead. Damirwantri, Paradihi. Rhaegal flapped low across Euron's deck and fried the remaining scorpion crew. Valyrian swooped after, jaws aflame like a kiln, turning the stern castle to molten ruin. Yet on the far side, the last unscathed raider poured men onto the grain ship in a savage rush. Axes, rusted maces, nets weighted with lead. Jorah vaulted the improvised plank. Below, sea foamed. A misstep meant tumbling between hulls grinding together. He landed on the grain carrier's deck to chaos, unsullied clash with Ironborn, freedmen slashing with dock knives. A horse escaped from hold, kicking in terror. An Ironborn swung a chain, hooks at each end. It caught an unsullied shield rim, yanking him off balance. Jorah stepped in, sword carving a downstroke that split the attacker's collarbone with a wet crunch. Blood sprayed the grinning squid painted on the deck planks. He parried, spun, severed a grapnel rope. The reaver leaning on that line tumbled backward into dark water. Another foe leapt forward, brandished a reaping axe. Jorah blocked, steel ringing, then shoulder-checked the man into the mast, pommel smashing his nose. "Cut lines," Jorah roared. "Drive them back." A whistle shrieked behind him, gray worms signaling from the flagship's rail. He flung a coil of burning pitch-soaked rope across the gap. It landed on another border cluster, setting their leathers alight. Screams rose. The ship heeled as sailors on the far side sawed mooring knives through the remaining raider lines. The enemy vessel, denied purchase, drifted astern. Suddenly a booming crack, followed by an ungodly groan, rolled through the gloom. Euron's lead ship, aflame port and starboard, lurched as Drogon landed square on its deck like a boulder from heaven. Timbers parted. Amid the bending mast, the Kraken King stood fearless, one hand balancing on the ruin. He lifted his chin to stare directly at the Dragon Queen perched above him, as if daring her to incinerate him where he stood. Some said Euron loved only storms, but Jorah glimpsed something else in that defiant posture. A man who worshipped ruin the way other men worshipped gods. Daenerys' mouth moved. Distance stole her words, but the challenge was clear. Drogon's chest expanded. The cavity beneath his scales glowed like banked forge coals. Euron opened his arms wide, an embrace of death, or of glory. Flame thundered down. Wood, sail, rope, men, metal, flesh, all vanished in the hideous white of dragonfire. The glow reflected across the water, turning every spray of wave into molten rubies. When Drogon's fire ceased, nothing of the ship remained but a torched rib cage sinking beneath black churn. No sign of Euron's silhouette. He was gone, burned or swallowed, and either fate suited Jorah well. But victory demanded cost. 2 grain ships ablaze, their holds sacrificed rather than let spoil feed Ironborn. 3 raiders fled east trailing smoke. 2 sank. The convoy reformed in the uneasy hush that follows battle. Dawn fully unfurled itself, painting the sea blood pink where ash drifted like snowflakes. Daenerys circled once more. Drogon steady though the tear in his wing glistened raw at the edge. When she landed aboard the flagship, pain pulsed in her features, pain for Drogon, not for herself. She dismounted, hands gentle on the warm scale near his shoulder. Rhaegal and Viserion set down upon trailing ships to let their riders, Valyrian thralls who tended them, dress scrapes and check armor plating. Jorah crossed the plank as sailors hauled it back and sank to one knee before her without thinking. "Your Grace," he said, "we hold the sea." She answered in a tired voice, only he could catch. "But the sea is wide still." Fingers stroked Drogon's dark hide. One wound small as a thumbprint felled Merax's at Hellholt. "We must stop the bleeding. We have healers." And Maester Kelvin distilled salve from black blood root quite strong for burns. Their eyes met. She nodded, trusting. "See it done, hand." He left her then to fetch Kelvin, learning along the way that 15 men lay dead, 19 wounded, 2 unsullied missing. The dead he could not restore, but the wounded he could comfort. He walked those decks until noon, offering what solace the steadiness of a veteran commander might supply, and at last found a quiet corner beneath the forecastle where he braced both palms against the rail and let the tremor loose. It coursed from his shoulders to his knees, silent but raw, battle nerves demanding tribute. He allowed it a moment, then mastered it again. 2 evenings later, a storm front rolled north out of the summer sea. Thunderheads bruised blue against failing daylight. The fleet shortened canvas, double-lashed ladders, stowed loose rope. On the windward side, Drogon's torn wing, slung by black scar gauze stitched from silk. The maester, had pronounced the wound shallow. Yet Daenerys refused to ground him. She only shortened his flights to a clockwise guard arc, and sent Viserion to mirror it counterclockwise. Rain began while the sky still shone amber near the horizon. Slant spears cold enough to sting. Sailcloth bellies slapped. The flagship pitched. In the council, Cabin Tyrion set lamps at both ends of the rough map to keep it flat, but droplets spattered ink all the same each time the door banged open. Daenerys, hair damp against her neck, tapped 2 fingers atop the Isle of Cedars. "Here we turn north," she declared. "Any further west, and we creep into Redwine Patrol waters. And the Arbor Fleet owes allegiance to the Crown in King's Landing." Tyrion agreed. "They'll signal our approach, then sprint to port to collect Lannister gold. Or what passes for it these days." Jorah's middle finger traced the curving line of currents. "North it is. Gullet crosses here. Narrow, but still wide enough for our largest hulls if the tide is right. Demna." Nisande noted supply numbers. Oathbread 28 days, water 14, salted mutton 30, pickled eel 12. "We must resupply at Tidewater Rock, or risk ration cuts." "Fishing improves near the stepstones," Yara countered, dripping seawater onto the deck as she hunkered over the chart. "Lure half the Mirish fleets away with rumor of Taroshi pearls, and take their markets clean." Tyrion snorted. "And when those Mirish captains realize their nets come up empty of dragons, they'll raise a bounty for our heads." "Let them." Yara's grin showed a predator's comfort with pursuit. "The sea answers only to teeth." Daenerys touched the map again, finger atop the word stepstones. "No fights we do not choose," she decreed. "The realm across that water bleeds. I will not waste its bandages here." Deliberations rolled on while storm rain hammered overhead. Lanterns bobbed. Jorah felt the ship breathe, each timber, each rope. He could have charted that flexing hull by memory now, reading moods as easily as hounds read a master's whistle. When at last Daenerys dismissed them, he lingered while others filed out, spines aching, parchment rolls tucked beneath arms. She closed the door, turning key in lock. Wind seeped through caulking, tasting of brine and copper. For a long time neither spoke. Rain pattered in an irregular rhythm, slower now, as though sky gathered breath. Daenerys set both palms flat on the map, as though gathering its weight into herself. "Each choice is a coin," she said quietly. "I spend them fast and do not know if my purse will hold." "Queens make change in blood and timber," he replied. "Purses replenish with victory." Her laugh was tired. Ever the warrior's math. She walked to the stern windows. Gull foam traced silver lines across black water below the glass. Lightning teeth flickered afar. "I have not dreamed dragon dreams in weeks. When we were still siegebound above Meereen, my sleep burned bright with things to come. Snow swirling at King's Landing, Iron Throne wreathed in roses of frost, dead men in shattered crowns. Now only black emptiness." She turned partly, hair shimmering where lamplight caught beads of water. "Does that trouble you?" A queen undreaming. "It speaks of burden, not failure," he said. "What if the dreams were guidance? What if my path strays?" Jorah stepped near. The deck up tilted, and he steadied them both unconsciously, hand on the edge of the chart table. "Dreams can foretell," he said, "but they can also seduce. My father dreamed of a Bear Island lordship restored through tournaments and tourneys, and death swallowed him. Your worth lies not in prophecy, but in will. That I have seen." "Nathan?" A flush touched her cheeks, not shy flame but fierce color. A forged kiss. She raised one hand to his grayscale scar, hovering without contact. "When I named you hand my enemies muttered that I gifted power to the man who once betrayed me. Perhaps they were right. Perhaps I did gift you power. Yet every dawn since, that power has protected me. So when my dreams fall silent, yours must speak louder." "You have them already," he answered. "They live in each order you give. The fleet sails forward because you dreamed a better shore. Menon." Outside a bolt forked heaven, illuminating sea and cabin alike. For the blink of that white electric instant, her eyes glowed violet white, dragon bright. Then darkness returned. Rain spattered. She said, "Stay with me until sleep takes us both." He bowed his head and stood sentinel while she sat upon the narrow berth, unbuckling wet jerkins, hair loosening. Her breath evened. At length she slept, soft hum of storm rocking the hull. Jorah kept watch, gaze fixed on the shifting play of lamplight over her face, and within the hush discovered that his own heavy lids betrayed him. Sleep drifted through, swift and sure. Morning startled the fleet with sun bursting between shredded gray remnants of cloud. The sea, scoured clean, gleamed like fresh steel. Crews strung damp clothes over lines. Dragon scales glinted bright as gems where healers applied poultice paste, and the scent of frying salt pork floated above every deck. The dragons themselves seemed renewed, Drogon's torn membrane already knitting at the edges, a faint lattice of scar tissue bridging the gap. Jorah and Tyrion walked the starboard gallery, taking tally of repairs. "I think," Tyrion said, shading eyes, "that I will compose a treatise entitled On the Limits of Heroic Posturing in the Face of Dragonfire. A memoir of Euron Greyjoy. It shall be equal parts satire and cautionary manual." "Make the title longer," Jorah offered dryly. "Scholars favor ribbons." Tyrion grinned. "Ah, see? Even a sober knight discovers wit when his belly is full of victory." His smile faded as they reached a rope fence section where carpenters replaced cracked spars. "That said, our number's thin. Dead men eat no rations, yet wounded do. Broken masts drink timber, and arrow slits drink pitch. Supplies tighten," Jorah acknowledged. "Your queen will not consider a shore until Westeros. Convince her we must take Tidewater Rock." Jorah studied the horizon where gulls circled a dark smear of land, still hours away under oar. "The rock serves as pirate den half the year. Could be infested." "You prefer King's Landing infested?" He gave no answer, already calculating. "Shore risk high. Delay possible. Yet wounded men heal faster on stable ground. Dragons draw less eye if keels hide behind tide pools." The decision would fall to Daenerys. He would present the ledger of costs and let sovereignty weigh the scales. Below them, sailors sang a shanty from Slaver's Bay, chorus stomping to keep time as blocks hoisted fresh sailcloth. The tune carried across water where other ships, some the color of honeyed oak, some black as funeral barges, echoed the whistle motif back and forth, until it crowded into a kind of messy choir. Jorah's heart stirred at the sound, men and women of diverse tongues woven into common labor. This is what she builds, he thought. Not only armies, chorus and keel. His reflections broke when a lookout cried atop the mainmast, "Birds! Gray sails north-northwest." Spyglasses snapped open. A nimbus of gulls indeed swirled in the far distance, and beneath them 4 sails, square-rigged high-tier cogs heavy in the water. Tyrion snatched a spyglass from a passing quartermaster. Fishers, perhaps, or merchants hugging the coast. Jorah felt unease prickle. Merchant captains fear Valyrian waters, too near the breaking earth. What of plague ships? Tyrion mused. Carrying pale mare victims to exile? Then we will keep our wind. Jorah signaled Grey Worm, who consulted flagmen. Colored pennants rose on yardarms. Maintain course, hold ready. Moments later, the 4 strangers tightened formation, one after another raising small banners of their own. Slate blue, bearing a black field crowing star. Jorah stiffened. Lannister reach colors, he muttered, but altered. Tyrion's face drained pale. That is the new sigil of Lord Randall Tarley, rechristened Warden of the South by Queen Cersei after the Battle of Ashford. He's likely contracted Essosi cell sales to harry us. Essosi? Jorah asked. Lycian privateers serve as coin. They know these straits. Tyrion closed the glass with a snap. Randall despises Targaryens. Enni. Dan. Before orders rippled down, water ahead churned. A sleek hull broke surface, her bow cut low, her sides painted mottled to blend sea. She flew no banner, Instead, a ragged charcoal pennant slapped the breeze. Code for plague ship. Yet, that code, perhaps, was decoy. Within moments, hatches on her deck flung wide, and a cluster of scorpion ballistas ratcheted upright, like jointed insects waking from slumber. They pivoted in eerie unison, each locking onto a separate target amidst Daenerys' fleet. The trap snapped. Hard to port, Jorah roared. Helmsmen hauled wheels. Yardarms turned, canvas thundered. Across the convoy, alarms rang. The lurking cogs fanned, revealing more weapon mounts disguised beneath cargo awnings. Firepots fat with wildfire, catapults rigged to fling stone jugs crusted with resin. Dragons beat sky. Drogon leading, the wound still raw but his spirit unbowed. Jorah watched Daenerys lean low over his neck, her expression unreadable. She lifted a hand, a small motion, and yet Jorah read it. Let them loose. Rhaegal dived first. Fire gouting. The plague ship's starboard flank vanished behind a green-orange sheet. Wildfire barrels ignited instant chain bursts, cooking sailors alive. Yet the cell sails had studied. From port they released harpoons not iron but water-cooled, each head filled with weighted hooks designed to cling after punching scale. One found Rhaegal's belly, wrapping rope around Hindleg Gadati. The dragon faltered, spun, shrieking. Its riders shouted for knives, other cell sails heaved to tighten the line. Jorah dashed to the aft ballista, furled in tarpaulin after repairs. He yanked the tarp, shoved the loader aside, and together they cranked the torsion springs. Grey Worm arrived at his shoulder. No words, only a nod. The ballista's iron bolt slid into trough, tip smeared with tar for frictionless flight. Jorah sighted. The cell-sail deckhands hauled rope, drawing Rhaegal nearer. The dragon's claws shredded railing, but the angle trapped his wings. Jorah exhaled. He fired. The bolt streaked, trailing a faint hum. It smashed the rope winch just as four men leaned to crank. Wood exploded. The winch drum spun free, coils whipping. One man's head parted clean, another flung screaming into iron stanchions. Rhaegal ripped loose, soared with a lurch, and rejoined sky. But the other cogs still advanced, catapults lobbing stone jars arcing toward the grain ships. Each jar burst midair, showering shards, glass full of biting green smoke. Poison vinegar stung lungs of sailors. Men gagged, capsized oars. Unsullied commanders responded with shield formations across decks, fashioning roofs to repel the falling death. Yet even wood and bronze could not stop the fumes bleeding through cracks. Atop Drogon, Daenerys swung south, dragging a curtain of flame upon the sea's surface, steam and smoke mixing. She carved a semicircle that forced the cell sails to adjust bearing, else run headlong into fiery tide. It gained precious moments for Jorah to rally captains into countercharge. Black iron-born hulls, Yara's vanguard, shot forward, rams foaming sea. One Lysine cog snapped outright when the prow of Yara's flagship, the Black Mongoose, punctured amidships and the impact's roar cracked open both hulls below waterline. The battle chopped into a maelstrom of isolated duels. Dragon versus catapult, ram versus reinforced bulkhead, until, through haze, a great bell rang thrice. Jorah's heart stilled. That bell hung only aboard the Queen's flagship. Something was amiss. Ignoring protocol, he sprinted along the listing deck, across a still-secured gangplank, onto the flagship's quarterdeck. Sailors or medics tried to bar his path, but one glance at the brooch on his cloak turned them aside. He reached the high stern castle. Daenerys knelt beside Drogon's taloned forefoot, a thin bolt buried above the wrist joint. The wound bled sluggish, black ichor mixing with bright red. She pressed a wad of cloth, soaked in vinegar, to slow infection, lips moving. Drogon's head lowered near deck, teeth the size of sword blades gleaming wet. Kelvin struggled with pincers too small for such a job. Jorah threw cloak aside, grabbed the tongs, braced knee against scale, and yanked. The bolt slid free, ridged barbs scraping. Drogon roared, sending deckhands stumbling. Jorah pitched backward, but held the spike. Blood soaked his shirt, none of it his own. "Salve," Daenerys commanded. Kelvin packed black blood root paste into the hole. Steam hissed as the reaction boiled surface toxins. Jorah discarded bolt, breath ragged. Daenerys glanced up. Gratitude mingled with worry. "Starboard hull compromised," she said. "Can you hold command?" He gained feet. "Tyrion will keep tally." Her hands shook, fatigue or fear for Drogon. But her voice was iron. "See them back in formation." He pivoted, barking to Grey Worm for shield shifts, signaled Yara to flank portside and mop up fleeing cell sails. Rain had ceased. The sun now towered fierce overhead, shimmering heat chewing the mist into tatters. In its glare dead ships drifted. Charred remains sending thin plumes heavenward. Burnt offerings to whichever god each man had favored. By late afternoon the battle ended. 3 of the 4 cogs sunk. Plague ship afire from bow to stern. Survivors clinging to wreckage. Daenerys permitted longboats to pick isolated castaways. No slaves sells words only, and chain them in holds. They may choose redeeming labor or the sea, she declared. Jorah stood on the forerail that evening watching the last tongues of flame die on driftwood corpses. Smoke and salt mixed like incense of war. He did not fancy poetry often, but the image clung. Sacrifice on salt altar. He knew what came next. Cycle of challenge would repeat until they reached Westeros. Cersei would not yield 1 foot of sea or land. When he turned to descend, Tyrion awaited with wineskin. "The hand bleeds," the dwarf observed, noting the soaked shirt. "Dragon's blood," Jorah answered. "Worth 10 of mine." A strange formulation. Tyrion stared across the red-pink horizon. "You speak of cost often. Let me ask, what price buys the safety of 1 queen?" "Whatever I have left." Tyrion sipped. "And if the price proves more than 1 man can pay?" Jorah folded arms made slick by dried acor. "Then those beside him will pay the rest." Tyrion nodded at that, satisfaction shadowed by sorrow. "The 7 save us all, or none." He trudged off, muttering about quills and casualty tallies. Within 5 days, Tidewater Rock loomed. A flat fist of stone rising sheer from breaker-lashed shoals, its cliffs honeycombed with smugglers' caves. Weathered watchtowers crowned the upper ledge, tiny against gull-streaked sky. When Daenerys' fleet rounded the largest promontory, a half-mast black flag drooped from the crenel top in token of plague quarantine. But lookouts spotted no bodies. No flies, no putrid ballast. A ruse again. Jorah led the landing party. Unsullied vanguard, Dothraki outriders, a handful of healers. Spray soaked his beard as longboats rode surf to the narrow shingle, fronting the sea gate. Mossy steps ascended into shadow. He smelled the trap before he saw it. Lamp oil, fresh, not ancient. As the second longboat grounded, arrows hissed from murder slits carved in basalt walls. 2 unsullied collapsed, throats transfixed. Instantly, Grey Worms signaled shields overhead, forming a moving tortoise until they cleared the gate. The interior tunnel angled sharply. Hidden cauldrons tipped, sending burning pitch cascading, but Dothraki had already flanked over the ridge, punting barrels of seawater down sluice gullies to douse flame. Room by room the rock surrendered. Its defenders were 3 dozen cell sails at most. Half drunk, the rest malnourished. Their captain lay already dead by self-inflicted blade, rather than face dragon wrath. The fortress yielded water cisterns sweet as mountain spring, smokehouses stacked with tinder-dry cod, and a dusty cellar stuffed with casks of Dornish red left from some bygone heist. Best of all, moldering alongside the wine were crates of crossbow bolts, fletched in Lannister crimson, still greased. That evening, torches lit the battlements where Daenerys stood, gazing at the anchored fleet. Waves smashed rock below in great thunderclaps. She smelled smoldering pitch from corpses burned beyond the sea gate, and the clean cedar smoke of new cook fires by the docks. Jorah approached, handing her a cup of that Dornish red. She sniffed, smiled ruefully. "Plunder's taste." "War's taste," he corrected. No innocent parted from it. She drank, savoring. Then, when my ancestors crossed the narrow sea, they took Dragonstone first. A volcanic island, harsh, unyielding, yet it gave shelter to grow might. Tidewater rock is no dragonstone, but perhaps it serves the same. We have days, not years, he warned gently. Days can forge iron if the furnace is hot enough. She rested elbows on the parapet. Below in the courtyard, children laughed. Freedmen's sons chasing each other between supply stacks. The sound drifted upward, improbably joyful. What will become of them when we reach Westeros? She asked. They will learn Westerosi speech. Eat Westerosi grain. And remember you freed them. Nandwan. And if Westeros chains them anew. His mouth tightened. Then Westeros learns the taste of dragon flame. Lightning flashed far out, silent. Heat lightning. She asked, does that fate frighten you, Bear? Yes, he said honestly. But not as much as losing what we fight for by gentle hesitation. Her hand found his, fingers calloused from reins and sword both. She squeezed. Then stay close. My shadow must not outgrow my soul. They exchanged no more words. Stars glimmered overhead. The sea boomed. Sailors' songs floated faint. Jorah understood then that the war would be waged not only on fields and ramparts, but within that woman's breast, between justice's bright sword and vengeance's darker one. He, hand of the queen, stood garrison at the gate of her heart, and woe to the enemy who dared attempt breach. 3 nights before departure from Tidewater Rock, the ravens came. One bore the black wax seal of Castle Black broken, though the parchment inside bore damp smears. Jon Snow wrote of a war beyond walls. Dead things walking, ice spiders at Hardhome. The fall of Eastwatch, fires that froze instead of burned. Another letter, smaller, came from Samuel Tarley at Old Town, where glass candles flared with images of whites wading across half-frozen rivers. Sam quoted ancient texts. When the dawn is strangled by night's own breath, only dragonfire can untie the noose. Daenerys read each letter twice. At council she spread them before her commanders. Voice steady though eyes tremble. The dead march, she said. And Westeros bleeds from both ends. If winter conquers the north, the south will kneel to it soon enough, Cersei's gold or no. We sail at sunrise, hard. Tyrion cleared his throat. Castle Black's ravens claim the wall yet stands? For now, she replied. Then our landing must be north of King's Landing. White Harbor, perhaps. The Stark girl Sansa rules there in her brother's stead. Daenerys' gaze swung to Jorah. Memories of northern snows etched into both their hearts. Sir Jorah, she said, your home stands near the Bay of Ice. How fares Bear Island in storms of dead? I cannot say, your grace. Pain cut. But Mormonts do not flee. They will fight until the last cub roars. I would meet these lions of the north, she said, and I would offer dragons in their sky. Tyrion laid down a fresh map. White Harbor's tide flats can hold our shallow keels, but if the dead assault from the hinterlands, we risk encirclement by both undead and Lannister fleets sweeping north. Let Cersei sail, Yara growled. Her galleys cannot row through pack ice. Ironborn can. Daenerys drummed fingers. Enough. At dawn, we sail to White Harbor. From there, letters ride to every northern holdfast. Jon Snow commands the north. I would parley. If he refuses alliance, we fight alone. If he accepts, we fight together. Either course ends upon the wall. Monedna. Jorah met her gaze. He saw no fear now, only steel bright as new coin. I will stand the wall's stones again, he vowed. Not alone. Her hand closed into fist. All of us. Dawn came crisp. Sky brushed with airy strokes of pink and pearl. The fleet pulled anchor. Tidewater Rock slipped astern, its battered towers reflecting sun like dull copper. The wind, cold and insistent, bore scents of the north. Pine tar, snowmelt, distant smoke. For the first time, the dragons complained of chill. Steam rose from their nostrils each exhale, vapor twisting higher until lost in blue. Healers wrapped their joints in oiled linen. Dragonfire burned hot, but joints stiffened nonetheless. Jorah stood at the prow of the flagship, cloak snapping, eyes fixed where the sea narrowed between stepstones. Gateway to Westeros proper. Memories hammered him. The day his father gave him Longclaw. The day Bear Island's bird arrived announcing Lord Jorah had taken the Black. The day Knight Jorah sold poachers into bondage and sealed his exile. He lifted a hand to feel winds bite and tasted remnant ash on the air. Burned ships, burned choices. Yet ahead waited penance wrapped in the form of service. Daenerys joined him at mid-morning, white cloak lined with bear fur given her by ship's quartermaster in token respect. The garment swallowed her slender form, but its weight seemed to please her. "Once," she said, voice caught between wonder and sadness, "your father wrote to mine at King's Landing pleading clemency for your crimes." The letter never reached him. Robert held the throne by then, Jorah said. Mercy was not a coin their house spent easily. If that letter had found hands more merciful, she mused, where would you stand today? Perhaps beside a gallery of old shields in some damp hall, waiting for taxes to ruin me anyway. He smiled faintly. But I would never have seen 3 dragons hatch in a funeral pyre. I would never have seen the bravest girl in the world rise queen among ashes. Her cheeks pinked and cold. One day, Sir Jorah, a bard will sing how you flattered a queen until her vanity toppled castles. Let castles tremble then, he said. The prow sliced foam. Above, gulls cawed. Far ahead, like a mist-bound promise, the faint ridge of land shimmered. Westeros, home soil. The sea journey neared its final act. But the war's first page waited still blank. And so the fleet sailed forward, bearing dragons, freedmen, unsullied, Dothraki, iron-born, and the hopes of a queen who dared to balance mercy and fire on the edge of one scarred man's steady hand. A salt wind became the first rough hand of Westeros across the hulls, steady and cold and tasting faintly of pine pitch from unseen shores. The fleet hauled north by northwest, sliding between ragged teeth of islets where ruined watchfires smoldered and gulls shrieked over drifted kelp. Day after day the coast marched closer until cliffs, hazed in sea mist, revealed green shoulders of forest beyond. White Harbor lay hidden still, but the land smelled alive. Wet soil and leaf mold, deer musk and distant hearth smoke, so unlike the baking dust of Meereen that some freedmen wept without knowing why. Jorah Mormont stood on the flagship's stern castle as the first northern fog wrapped about them. Long keel fishing boats appeared, shadowy shapes rocking at anchor, their crews gaping at dragons gliding overhead. Word raced faster than wind. By evening harbor lanterns winked in cautious welcome. Yet no banners greeted them, only bare poles swaying. The city hedged its bets. Daenerys dismounted Drogon on the outer breakwater where granite steps vanished beneath each swell. The dragon's wing, scar line faded to silvery scar tissue, folded tight against the stiff breeze. She wore a cloak of midnight wool, banded with pale bear fur at the collar, and beneath it black leather scaled like the creatures she rode. Snow melt drizzle beaded on her braids as she gazed at the gates. Massive timbers braced in iron, half open like lips parted to speak but not commit. White cloaks trimmed in gray approached. Manderly guards, spears upright. Their captain, a rangy woman with mourning lines under her eyes, raised a horn and blew 3 notes. Welcome, caution, truce. No voice answered from the battlements, but chains rattled, the sea gate widened, and the fleet's lead galley oared through. Jorah followed her ashore, boots sinking in a slurry of crushed shells on the quay. Behind, unsullied companies filed with drilled grace. Dothraki leading their skittish mounts off ramps, dragons circling overhead with wind thunder wing beats that turned every watching face upward in awe and dread. White Harbor had suffered siege under Bolton and Lannister both. Its walls bore scorched scars, its towers new mortar. Yet its people had never seen fire that flew on leathered wings. A herald, stout, cheeks red from the chill, stepped forward and bowed. Her Ladyship Sansa Stark, acting Warden of the North, bids you entry. Her chambers prepare council in the Lord's Tower. Eyes flicked toward Drogon, throat bobbing. The Great beast will be afforded space on the old fishmonger's field. Outside walls, if it please your grace. Daenerys inclined her head. Formal, yet not cold. Dragons need sky, not stone. They shall den outside your city, and guard it too while we speak. That reassurance carried enough steel to remind the herald that refusal was unwise. He bowed again, relieved. Through crooked streets, they advanced. Fishmongers paused, gutting whitefish to stare. Washerwomen pushed damp hair from brows. Soot-faced boys chased behind unsullied sandals until a sergeant's stern glance scattered them. The chill bit deeper inland, and light snow began. Thin flakes swirling like dying moss. It clung to Daenerys' eyelashes, to Jorah's beard bristles, to the scar slashing his cheek. Inside the audience hall, a hearth the size of a galley's cabin blazed. Carpets of soft grays and russet lay upon basalt flagstones. A heart tree limb, still white bark alive with crimson veins, leaned against the back wall, where a weirwood face had been carved in earlier ages. Candles flickered at its feet. Lady Sansa Stark rose from the high-backed chair beside that relic. She was younger than rumor, but carried herself like old granite, long red hair braided down one shoulder, dress of forest green wool, trimmed with white embroidery. At her waist hung no blade, though Jorah sensed knives in her gaze the moment it settled on him and on the queen. He knelt. Daenerys remained standing, though she lowered her hood as courtesy. Sansa's voice, when it came, was even, polished, northern. You bring dragons to a land already aflame, your grace. Welcome, and may your fire warm us, not burn us. Daenerys stepped forward, boots silent on caribou hide. When winter swallows flame, both freeze to death. My dragons burn only those who would see the living emptied. She offered a scroll, Jon Snow's letter, ink barely dry from Castle Black's rookery. Your brother asks aid. I answer. Sansa accepted without breaking eye contact. The hall breathed, tension a living thing at the rafters. Beside her, a tall gray-bearded knight shifted. Sir Davos Seaworth, smuggler turned hand to kings. Old allegiances layered like frost on branches. He inclined head respectfully to Jorah, recognition in his sea-colored eyes. Tyrion stepped from behind the unsullied line. Lady Sansa, he said softly. It's been some years. I trust our last marriage left no lasting wounds beyond the embarrassment. A ghost of a smile brushed her lips, but the smile did not reach the eyes. Lord Tyrion, embarrassments melt. Lessons remain. Let us hope newer lessons teach warmer wisdom, he replied, then bowed. The opening exchange woven. Sansa signaled servants. Hot mulled ale arrived, bread laden with caraway, bowls of venison stew that steamed in the chill. Formalities turned to council quickly. Maps rolled, dispatches read, small folk petitioners ushered out. Snow tapped at shutterboards while inside, they spoke of dead things across the last river, of Hearthhome refugee columns, frostbitten and frantic, of Umber Scouts missing from last Hearth and Karstark riders, who returned spattered with blackened blood that steamed even in frigid air. Sansa lifted a carved game piece, a direwolf, in slender fingers. Jon rides Eastwatch Road with wildlings and knights. Watch survivors. He means to meet us here in 10 days, if the weather holds. Our walls will not hold the dead, we must ride to them. She placed the wolf on the map beside a miniature raven carved for the watch. We hold the shore long enough for ships to ferry south whoever still breathes. Daenerys countered with an ivory dragon. Dragons strike the vanguard, break their ranks, clear the road. Unsullied form shield line at the causeway. Dothraki harry flanks. Survivors move behind. Jorah read the small shifts of tension in the faces around the table. Northern lords, young Dustin, Grim Ryswell, Lady Barbri's nephew, others he knew only by sigils, frowned at foreign commands. Davos swallowed doubt. His glance at Tyrion begged caution. Jorah spoke, his rasp echoing. Dragons bleed as any creature. The dead carry spears of ice, javelins hardened by sorcery. We cannot waste flights on ill-chosen targets. 3 dragons must strike where the tide is thickest, not on scattered whites. We need a choke. He tapped the map. a gorge north of Moat Caelan's ruins, where the King's Road narrowed across an ancient embankment. Stone walls here, ruined but defensible. Natural funnel. We fortify, lure the horde south, and hammer. Sansa weighed the notion, brow furrowed. Few high towers for archers, what of flanks? Swamp on the east. Shallow lake on west, he answered. We freeze the lake, thin ice cracks underweight. Tyrion snapped fingers. Dragons needn't burn the dead. They melt lake surface by brief passes, then climb. The dead march onto ice. It breaks. They sink. Those that crawl out meet spears. Ser Davos scratched his beard. It's a gamble. Winter's winds freeze water nearly as fast as fire melts it. Then we time it close, Jorah said. Risk fewer passes. Arguments churned, but with each rotation of thought the plan took root. Sansa at last nodded. We must send ravens. Gather men, cut trees for ramparts. She faced Jorah full. You know the swamps. You ride now, map them ahead of my scouts. Jorah accepted. It felt like returning to a mantle he never truly shed. That night, the hall's sleeping furs seemed warmer for the company of the living. Yet Jorah roamed corridors restless. Torchlight chased his shadow along limestone. In the rookery, he spied Daenerys alone, backlit by snow-dim moon through slit windows, stroking a raven perched on her wrist. The bird bore new lash marks, messenger of some other front. She did not startle. It appears Randall Tarley's other sons have sworn to Cersei. They march on Storm's End now that the Reach lies famished. The South bleeds while we freeze. War always bleeds at more places than we can plug. He touched the grayscale scar unconsciously. It ached and cold. Plug here first. She fed the raven a seed, released. As its wings beat away, she whispered so faint the wind nearly swallowed. If this land rejects me, will fire be all I have left? He answered without thinking. This land is breaking, and will reach for the first steady hand. You need not burn what will kneel willingly. She studied him, and perhaps found some reflection there that satisfied. Ride safe, Bear. He bowed and descended. Next dawn he led a column south. Ghosts of the morning, a Dothraki banner of light cavalry, 200 shield spears unsullied, 20 North scouts under Riswell. The world outside White Harbor was color-drained, snowfields turning every shape into wolves of white shadow. Pines bent heavy, branches whispering like old women. They crossed the frozen white knife, ice groaning. Beyond, marshes stretched, pools rimmed with hoarfrost. Jorah remembered duck hunting with Jor in boyhood, remembered stepping stones now buried. He dismounted, knee-deep. The water, though crusted in glass, hid hollows ready to swallow careless feet. They advanced slow, marking shallows with torch stakes. At dusk, they reached the embankment, a raised stone cause, mottled with moss and wind-carved gargoyles. Ruins of a watchtower listed, cracked open like a giant's ribcage. Yet foundation stones stood, and earthwork sloped away, forming natural trench. Jorah's breath misted. He could almost see lines of unsullied shields there, the ranks of whites pressing. He ordered encampment just north. Night, there was not black, but deep violet, sky ablaze with curtains of green shimmer. Aurora? Dothraki, who had never seen such lights, whispered about spirits of skyriders. Unsullied maintained stoic routines, though some bowed toward the North Star as if to harness its pride. Jorah wrote dispatch scrolls by ember glow. Groundholds need siege timber, ice thickness 2 feet, vantage for dragons, safe. He sealed with wax, pressed the bear and 3-headed dragon sigil Daenerys had bestowed. In the hush before sleep he thought of Bear Island. Childhood nights he'd lain under firs, listening to pines creak outside shutters, thinking them sea monsters dragging claws across shoreline. Now creatures worse than legend walk. Would the Mormonts hold? Lyanna, young and fierce, might yet stand at Old Castle Gate. She would scowl at his exile but fight at his side. He caught himself drifting toward homesickness and forced focus. Tomorrow they would cut trees, set traps. Work began at first pale gray. Axes bit pine. Smoke rose. His gloves stiffened with frost. Breath rasped. Ryswell's scouts vanished south and returned near dusk, leading 3 shaggy men in furs. Crannog men from Grey Water, watchers of bog. Their chief, Torrin Reed, carried a spear tipped with dragon glass. "Night hunts here," he said in rasped murmur. "We tracked dead crossing at the Shivering Ford 3 nights ago. Stags still run north, deer to the sea. They sense what comes." Jorah invited him to map. Torrin traced paths with charcoal, marking where ground tremored beneath mast feet. They follow sound, heat, maybe heartbeat. But water, they forget water's treachery. Jorah smiled grimly. "Then water we give them." They set teams to carve holes through the ice sheet, in patterns like runic chains, each a weak link disguised under fresh powder. Dothraki, agile on horseback, dragged logs to build causeway palisades. Unsullied shovel earth, mix with brine, pack against cedar braces. The slurry froze, stone hard. Ravens soared nightly, black shards against stars, bearing updates. From White Harbor word arrived that Joan's party neared Queenscrown and would press to meet them at the moat. Lady Sansa sent wagons of tar, barrels of salted beef, smiths with iron spades. Tyrion wrote a private line to Jorah. "Convince your queen patience. Northern hearts are like frozen rivers. Crack them gentle, else they sweep bridges away." Jorah pocketed the letter. Dragons arrived on the 4th day. Snow whirled as wind from their wings blasted trenches clear. Rhaegal and Viserion landed behind the causeway, curling tails around frost-shattered boulders. Drogon circled once, then descended a quarter league beyond, near a hot spring steaming through white ground. Daenerys dismounted, touched the water, frowned. Warm enough to drink, but not enough to thaw a lake quickly. She toured the defenses with Jorah. Workers paused, awed. She spoke with them, Northmen and Unsullied both, in their own tongues, praising, urging caution with hidden holes. To Torrin Reed she gifted an obsidian dagger from her own belt. The Crannog man bowed so low his braid swept snow. That night, Jorah found her outside her tent wearing no cloak, letting snowflakes melt on eyelashes. "You'll freeze," he chided. "Fire lives easy inside me," she answered. "I fear frost less than silence." She gestured at sleeping camp. "When they dream, they trust me. When I dream, I see nothing. The void remains. Dreams will return," he said. "Battle shapes them." Lightning flickered far north, though no storm clouds. A blue crack across stars. Both stilled. Low after rumble followed. Not thunder. Something else. Jorah's blood chilled regardless. At dawn 5th day, Jon Snow rode in. He looked older than last memory. Hair threaded with silver at temples. Beard rimed with icicles from breath. He dismounted a rangy Garin, clasped forearms with Jorah. Their first greeting as near cousins since exile. Emotions flickered behind his dark eyes. Regret, relief, wariness. "Your father spoke of you," he said quietly. "He believed you'd find the right road. Let's hope it begins here." Jorah guided him to Daenerys. Their meeting was no grand reunion of legend, but 2 commanders stepping into joint burden. They walked the parapet above frozen marsh, boots crunching. Jon described Eastwatch's fall. Giants whites, polar bears with blue flame eyes, corpse storms that spiral midair. His voice never rose, yet each detail carved deeper dread. Daenerys listened, face untouched by shock. "We lure them here. Break them here," she said at last. He met her eyes. "We lure the lieutenants, White Walkers. Kill them, the whites shatter." Sam found a count of dragon steel blades and dragon glass arrows, but the walkers avoid open risk. "They will send dead first, wait to see our flame die. Then, they come." "No. So we make them think flame dies," she mused. Tyrion just arrived with fresh quills, blew into cold hands. A ruse to feign vulnerability, invite them onto thin ice. He warmed to the scheme rapidly. Davos frowned but offered no alternate miracle. They planned through snow-blind midday. Dragons hold high. Refrain from fire until halfway through ice crossing. Infantry appear beleaguered. Fall back strategically. Let dead mass on central sheet. Then, Drogon and Viserion melt edges. Rhaegal sweeps walkers with obsidian shard tail club, newly forged by Northsmiths. Jon and Jorah lead ground reserve, armed with dragonglass axes to strike stranded walkers. Risk soared beyond counting. Water might refreeze too swift. Walker javelins might fell a dragon. Morale might falter. Yet time allowed no softer art. 2 nights later, a horn blew thrice. The old warning of the watch. Scouts on the north ridge sprinted, screaming the words the world dreaded. They come. Snowdrift changed direction, as though drawn by enormous inhalation. A pall of mist reached first. Sheets of gray that muffled sound. Then the dead emerged. They were less army than avalanche. Shapes jerking, stumbling, yet relentless. Human forms leaned at impossible angles, bones jutting, faces mask white against gloam. Among them lumbered bear corpses, elk skeletons tangled in leather straps, a mammoth with ribs bound by ice sinew pulling a sledge of bleached skulls. The noise they made was not roar but hiss like ripped grain sacks. Silence devouring itself. Jon drew Longclaw. Pale fire shimmered along its Valyrian ripples. Jorah hefted a dragonglass-edged longaxe, its haft-whirled cedar. Beside him, gray worms' phalanx locked shields. Dothraki riders kicked mounts into impatient circles, Arex catching torch glare. Ice beneath the dead cracked, yet they flowed onward, weight dispersing across natural shelves. Not yet, Jorah told himself. Wait until center. Above, dragons wheeled in widening loops. Their shadows flickered across field like omen runes. The dead reached the first hidden holes. White bodies plunged into dark water, arms flailing. Whites behind marched over them, trampling their heads below surface. More fell. Still, they advanced. Horn blew once, withdraw Tara. Northern shield lines stepped back. Perfect discipline forged in 1 week of relentless drilling. Many freedmen stumbled but regained formation. Yon's wiling archers on flanks loosed shafts tipped dragonglass. Some walkers at rear shattered in sapphire shards. But the lieutenants, tall, lean, armored in ice crystal, stood apart, watching. Drogon shrieked. That was the moment. Fire burst across sky, a ribbon of orange searing the horizon. He raked lengthwise along east rim where ice thinned. Steam exploded. Water geysered. Dead tumbled, claws scraping slick edges. Rhaegal followed, angled lower, his exhale shorter, melting center span. The plain became a spiderweb of fractures. A white walker lifted arm. From behind mammoth sledge a massive spear of ice launched. Jorah's stomach fell. He knew target. The missile streaked toward Viserion, who banked, but wind slowed. The spear grazed wingtip's sail, slicing membrane. The dragon faltered, skidding across updraft. Daenerys' own cry rang above din. Viserion regained altitude but bled a streak of molten frost. Jon pointed. Marksmen fired dragonglass javelins at the walker. 2 struck, shattering harmlessly against an invisible aura. The walker turned his staring blue gaze upon them. Only moment, but in that moment Jorah saw his opportunity. Cavalry, he bellowed. Dothraki surged behind him onto causeway flank left. Hooves churning up powder. He led a smaller charge straight onto ice, while cracks spidered below. He felt weight shift. Prayed math of breakage would favor. Dead whites turned, reorienting. At 10 yards, Jorah hurled axe. Its obsidian edge hummed. The walker raised sword of frozen crystal, but the axe cleaved beneath collar. Into shoulder. For breathless fragment of silence, the lieutenant hung astonished, then shattered like glass dropped on marble. With its death, 500 whites collapsed, clattering as bones. Ice groaned, free of weight now, and fractured wide. Water swallowed remnants. Jorah skidded horse sideways, retreating. Another walker advanced from mist, slower now, uncertain. Cross Lake Jon dueled one tall as a tower. Longclaw met Iceblade. Sparks blue and white bursting. Wolves of mist snarled round their boots. The battle blurred into cruel dreamscape. Dragons traded fire at rim, sometimes striking living men caught too near. Screams rose, frozen throat dissipated. Whites that reached ramparts climbed each other's backs, forming writhing ladders. Unsullied butts, shattered skulls, shields edge-bashed torsos back beneath water. Dothraki curved swords parted necks, yet each kill risked stumbling onto thin slush. Sansa watched from tower far south with field glass. She saw her brother locked with Walker commander, saw Jorah's bear pelt cloak vanish amid white swarm, saw flames gutter as snowfall thickened. Yet she could only pray. The sky darkened midday to twilight as swirling snow swallowed sun. The dragon silhouettes blurred, flame truncated by whipping gusts. This was the Walker's weather. Viserion, weakened, flapped lower, seeking purchase on a basalt promontory. Two walkers somewhere in haze raised arms together. An unnatural vortex wound upward, needles of ice whipping faster than any gale. It slammed into Viserion's wounded wing. Bones snapped. The dragon shrieked as though the world's harp strings broke. Daenerys screamed Drogon down in diving spiral. She surged past Jon's duel, trusting him to finish. Drogon landed next to Viserion, just as the dragon toppled sideways into snow, chest heaving. Jorah saw it up. Every instinct screamed, protect. He barreled through milling whites, left sword buried in gullet of one. Yanked dragonglass dagger free. Sprinted on foot now. Snow-blinded, he fixed focus on Drogon's mass. Walkers sensed Queen's proximity. 4 advanced eyes cold moons. He reached first, intercepted blow aimed at Daenerys where she knelt by Viserion's head. His dagger found Walker wrist. Obsidian parted ice flesh like soapstone. The creature's hand fell. Still gripping spear, Jorah kicked it back. Second Walker lunged. Drogon's tail lashed, smashing it mid-torso. Shards flew. Third Walker did not attack. Instead, it lifted an arm toward Daenerys, telegraphing some spell of frost. Jorah stepped between, raising the broken scorpion bolt had carried strapped to harness as emergency stake. He drove it through the Walker's sternum. The icy armor cracked, spiderweb fissures spidering. The creature shattered, its crown-like horns tinkling like chandelier glass. The fourth Walker collided with him instant later, sword cleaving his left shoulder. Steel met grayscale scar ridge, partial plate parted, pain white-hot. He fell to knees yet thrust upward blind. The shard nicked Walker's cheek. Silver sliver, parted cheekbone. That small wound sufficed. It broke structure integrity. The Walker burst. Pain roared. Numbed arm dangled. But Daenerys was safe. Crouched still by Viserion, stroking muzzle. The wounded dragon rolled one amber eye at Jorah, blinked. Thanks? Recognition? He would never know. Drogon launched upward then, rage fueling a spiral that tore new sky path through blizzard. He banked west, then east, exhaling constant flame sheet, carving corridor of clear air. Jon, still locked with his foe, saw clarity open. He parried, pivoted, and decapitated Walker. Its death triggered collapse of another wave. Field suddenly thinned. Tyrion's horns sounded withdrawal. Survivors of the dead turned, retreating north beyond visibility curtain. The battle, hours old, concluded not in triumph but ragged reprieve. Icefield cratered, pockmarked, steaming in many places. Medical tents erected. Jorah refused stretcher until Daenerys herself leaned close. Voice raw, "Zit or by the Seven'll order you tied down." He obeyed. Maester stitched, poured fire wine on wound. Grayscale scar tissue made closure tricky but infection unlikely. Night that followed was quiet, save distant cracking of refreezing lake. Sansa arrived with fresh blankets. She found Daenerys awake beside Jorah's cot, and Jon dozing across aisle. In the lamplight, the three talked softly. Of losses, 63 unsullied, 39 Northmen, 15 Dothraki, 2 dragons injured. Of successes, 7 walkers destroyed, half the horde drowned or crushed. Snow fell gentle now, as though battle had wrung fury from clouds. When Sansa left, Daenerys touched Jorah's hand, whisper, "You have bled for me, again and again. For the living, he corrected. You only carry their fire. She leaned, pressing forehead to his, breath scented of smoke and birch. Rest, bear. When dawn breaks we plan next snare. He slept then, not deeply, drifting through memories of Bear Island's surf and Marine sun, merging bizarrely. Once he felt her hand leave his and woke to gray gloom. She was gone, outside with dragons, talking to them in murmured Valerian. He drifted back. Snowmelt dawn found camp braced for retaliation that did not come. Scouts reported tracks north but scattered. The dead regather out of bowshot. Their losses perhaps forced pause. Tyrion found Jorah by palisade, arm in sling. You do realize, he said, that you may now add Walker Slayer to your litany. Titles don't keep frost from bones, but they warm hearts of men who follow. Tyrion's eyes flicked to dragon perches. In hearts of queens. Jorah shrugged, pain flaring. She needs hearts of whole realm. Mine alone is small comfort. Tyrion smiled crookedly. Small comforts build foundations. That day Davos arrived from White Harbor with fresh men and wagons. He told of Sansa's decree. All able holdfasts send fighters to the moat. All children older than 5 evacuated by sea to Sisterton, Skagos, Bear Island. Seat lords complied. They sensed turning tide. 2 days passed without Walker assault. Tension turned brittle. Men whispered of tricks. On the third dawn, ravens dashed south with message. The horde splits, columns skirting lake east and west, seeking other crossings. Jon convened rapid council. Daenerys argued to pursue on Dragonback, burn their columns before they regather. Jorah cautioned wounds not yet healed might ground dragons far from defense lines. Tyrion proposed smaller strikes, detach cavalry to hairy edges, lure into another trap nearer Winterfell, where supply lines stronger. Discussion drifted when a scout staggered into camp half-naked, covered in frostbite. Eastern column. Stumbling pass. They ride dead horses of ice. They outpace us. Last hearth fallen. He collapsed. Silence swallowed. Daenerys' eyes hardened. No more retreats. We strike now. Jorah tried to rise but his shoulder flared. She knelt, voice low. You ride second wave. Heal first. Then? He set jaw. First wave. Their wills clashed silently, but Jon intervened. He lives this land. Needs rest to guide children fleeing woods. I'll lead first strike. Rhaegal can bear me. Daenerys hesitated, then nodded. Rhaegal's saddle strapped before noon. Jorah watched them rise into snow sky. Bitterness and pride twinned. He spent hours then touring triage tents, gripping hands of wounded, listening to delirious tongues of Sellswords who had chosen to fight for coin, but now fought for world's breath. He whispered Bear Island prayers, replaced torn blankets, scolded medics to keep fires fed. Evening brought wailing horns again. Return signal. Rhaegal glided in. Jon riding sure despite frost encrusting hair. The strike had burned half the east column. But walkers retreated intact, commanding storm to cloak them. Winter pressed thus, day upon day, battle upon battle. They fought at Shivering Ford, at Cold Marsh, at the ruins of King's Course. Each time walkers thinned, yet dragons bled. Men died, the land shredded underfoot. Stories of Daenerys' flame spread. Farmers named her Hearth Mother. Others called her Doom's Bride. Through it all, Jorah remained her shadow. His arm healed slowly, bound in salve of bear fat and witch hazel. Nerve twinged each swing, but he trained nightly. He wrote to Lyanna Mormont, counseled to stand firm and promised help. He drafted letters to Stormlands, to Riverlords, urging join cause while Lannisters starved them for war in south. When moon turned, the army encamped southeast of Winterfell on wind-blasted plain, where old barrow mounds rose like broken teeth. Sansa, reunited with Jon, greeted them on ramparts. Word said Riverland's banners marched via the twins, having ousted Freys at last. Dawn of reunion painted sky, pale gold behind dragons perched on Wintertown towers. Small folk knelt, hearing them roar. The Starks feasted commander cadre in Great Hall. There Jorah sat one table below dais, listening as Daenerys and Sansa exchanged pledges. Dragons for North, hospitality for Queen. Wine flowed, yet politics slithered also. Lords Glover and Serwyn muttered fears of southern rule, of fire debt. Jorah marked faces, planned charm offensives, remembered his exile lesson. Hearts win wars. Late in feast, Daenerys rose, goblet raised. The North has suffered beyond any realm. Let my dragons guard your walls, and my fleet feed your hearths. We stand side by side until ice breaks and spring remembers. Cheers answered, but not universal. She saw that. She met Jorah's gaze. He gave slight nod. Patience, too. Patience would be tested next morn when Maester brought news. Cersei's armies mass at Blackwater Rush. She bargains with Iron Bank for sellsword legions. War waits south, while winter rages north. Two fronts, two fires. Council argued deep into night wind, rattling arrow slits. Tyrion urged, splitting force, daunting south while holding north. Davos worried divide invites defeat in both. Jon insisted the dead first, Cersei afterward. Sansa observed that Cersei's hunger for power might delay her until snow weakens supply. If they can send rumors of plague to her camps. Through swirl of voices, Jorah offered quietly. What if we starve the corpse army? They feed not, yet they breathe sorcery, cold drawn from air. We burn forests south of their encampments, drive them into tundra stripped of energy. Dragons ignite long fire lines, funnel frost creatures where ice cannot sustain. Samwell Tarly, arrived from Old Town with weather scrolls, brightened. Heat pockets may disrupt their ungodly winter, weaken Walker mastery. Plan formed. Carve a corridor of charred earth from Feverwater River to Long Barrow. Deprive dead of ambient cold. Dragons would fly runs each midday. Ground troops torch brush. Risk to environment monstrous, but lesser than eternal night. Daenerys accepted. She named Jorah Field Marshal of Fire Lines. Grey Worm second. Over next week, columns marched with firepots. Dragons roared overhead. Forestlands crackled. Smoke pillars twisted heaven. Night glowed embers. Dead responded with fury, launching assault on western flank near Nori Watchpost. Battle there raged 3 nights, but depleted of frost, aura. Walker blades cracked easier. Whites brittle. Wrangled down 2 walkers with tail alone. Drogon's fire lasted longer, hotter. When snow finally ceased falling for first time in moons, men wept. Sunrise revealed patches of thawing earth, mud stink mixing with wood smoke. Birds returned, crows first, then hardy sparrows. Hoped, dared breathe. Still, the walkers existed, though driven north near Dreadfort Path rumored abandoned. Scouts glimpsed them marching toward shattered Weirwood Grove beyond the Gift. Perhaps regrouping, perhaps guarding some secret. Jon proposed, final strike. Ride to Hearttree Grove, slay the Night King among his withered gods. Daenerys insisted on dragons and Jorah insisted on leading vanguard. Sansa argued keep Winterfell garrison strong. If strike failed, walls must hold. 3-pronged force departed. Jon and Ghost on foot with Wildling tracker squad. Jorah, Grey Worm and 100 unsullied spearhead on light horses. Daenerys and Drogon overhead, regal ridden by a Dothraki bloodrider now half crippled, but fierce, Viserion healing, with Sam's poultices. They marched through forest charred to skeletal silhouettes, then into valley crusted with ice untouched by fires. Here cold lingered unnatural. Night fell, starless. Campfires sputtered, timbers freezing to stone. At midnight, horns of the dead wailed. Jorah rose sword in hand. Frostbite stung knuckles despite gloves. From tree-line figures emerged. Not whites but living, northern farmers, some children, driven as shields by skeletal herds. Walkers used innocence as armor. Jorah's heart sank. How fight? Daenerys hovering, saw same. She banked Drogon but fire could kill victims as sure as saviors. She circled, screaming orders to loose arrows only at walkers. Jorah dismounted, walked forward alone, unarmed. He raised voice, old language of first men taught by crannogmen. "Come to hearth, children of man. Fire warms, ice lies." Some shields looked up, eyes full of tears, lips cracked. A boy of 8 broke rank first, sprinted toward him. A walker struck, but its blade missed by inch. The boy dove. Jorah scooped him, dashed back. Unsullied advanced now, shields overhead, forming corridor. More civilians poured through, whites lumbering behind. Jon and Ghost arrived from flank, attacking Walker at corridor mouth. Longclaw shattered it. With shield innocence safe, Daenerys unleashed Drogon. Flame like dawn erupted, cleansing whites without cooking freefolk beyond. When the last walker died, silence hammered. Among dead, Jorah found no Night King. Their quarry remained. Boy at his arms looked up, whispered. "They made us walk till feet bled." Cold voices in heads. Jorah soothed. Morning saw retreat. Mission half done, but major victory. They escorted refugees to Winterfell, where Sansa took child's hand. Tears unshed. War stretched. Stories multiplied. Dragons melting frozen rivers. Jorah losing consciousness after riding Regal to rescue trapped scouts, reviving only after Daenerys held torch to his cheek and shamed him back to life. Tyrion negotiating bread shipments from the Eyrie in exchange for promise that Daenerys would restore Aeron claim to 9 stars. Davos smuggling captured Lannister ravens carrying false dispatches to sow dissent. Through months, Jorah's love remained silent compass. He wore no chain of office now, for war cares not for finery, yet every soldier called him Hand. At council fires he spoke seldom, but his words landed like hammers. Once, when Northerners doubted Daenerys' mercy after a hamlet burned accidental, he rode alone into square, doffed cloak, showed grayscale scar, told tale of queen who sent friend across sea to seek cure though he'd betrayed her. By end even old Glover wept. Doubts faded. One spring-like day, ravens brought southern news. Cersei dead, strangled by own brother inside Red Keep as wildfire casks accidentally exploded while they argued retreat. The South fracturing. Footlords seeking parley with whichever power saved them. Iron Bank withdrew loans. Sellsword Golden Company turning mercenary against themselves. War there ended without dragons stepping. Thus North remained final front. That evening, Daenerys found Jorah on Winterfell battlements. Below, new buds peeked through snowmelt mud dye. She leaned beside him. "You said once storms break upon stone. I have become stone too hardened. The war may end. What then of rulers?" "You are flesh still," he said, touching cloak edge. "Scars prove living, not petrification." She closed eyes, relief raw. "When winter's corpse melts, I would name a council of kingdoms, no more iron throne of blades. Some say such dream will fail. Dreams failing never stopped you." He looked to horizon glowing rose with dawn. "I will stand at your side until dream breathes, or we breathe no more." She turned, kissed his scar. "Then stay, hand of my heart." Below, a horn sounded south gate open. Jon returning with new prisoner. A gaunt walker bound in chains of dragonglass, something no man had managed. Its eyes flickered like dying stars, as though fear. They would study, learn secrets. The war's final act approached. Yet even as threat remained, Jorah glimpsed future. Fields greening, freedmen overturning war earth to plant barley, dragons soaring not for burning, but for play above rivers. He felt tired bones ache, but welcomed ache. It meant he would walk into spring alive. Night turned soft with owl hoots. Snowmelt drip from Crenel echo ticked time for new age. Queen and Hand stood silent, side by side, until first true Robin of Year landed on parapet, sang thin fragile note that nevertheless pierced memory of all screaming battles. They listened, and though many miles of frost and steel still lay ahead, they believed at last that 5 hours of darkness could indeed give way to dawn that stayed. Akai, Andei, Kanakai. Snowmelt drummed from the gargoyle mouths of Winterfell's battlements. each drop catching dawn and shattering it into sparks that died in the slush below. In the godswood, the last of the frost clung in translucent scales to branches of the ancient heart tree. But a steady drip of crimson sap stained the melted patches like slow blood. Near its roots, within a lattice of iron stakes driven deep and wound with dragon-glass chains, the captured walker knelt in silence. It had been 3 days since Jon brought the creature south. 3 days in which the storm clouds that for months had blanketed the north parted often enough to let thin spears of sunlight stab the bailey. 3 days in which men who had never seen a walker alive, if alive was the word, crowded along parapets to watch it, then departed goose-fleshed, grateful for the rising warmth of spring yet unable to shake the chill the thing exuded. It did not struggle. It did not speak. But in its sapphire eyes a war waged. Not rage, but an alert, measuring hunger, as though every face it regarded became a crack in armor it meant to exploit. Jorah Mormont walked across the damp cloister with slow, even steps. His left arm rested in a sling, the shoulder still a dull ember of ache when weather shifted. The maester said the wound would knit clean. Jorah cared only that it kept sword in hand. He paused at the ring of chains. Cold radiated from them. The dragon-glass shards embedded in links steamed faintly where morning light struck. Old magic resisting new day. 2 unsullied posted on either side stiffened at his approach. He dismissed them with a nod. Their footfalls retreated, leaving only caw of rook above, and the soft interplay of wind in fragile green buds. The walker lifted its face. Its skin was translucent, tinted faint blue as glacier ice. It was not the Night King, that vanished tyrant who once led the horde. Jon believed Dany's earlier strike had shattered him somewhere within the war's smoke, but neither was it a simple thrall. Its brow, high and unlined, bore a circlet of ridged horn-like substance, marking captaincy. When it inhaled, icy vapor drifted from nostrils and crystals froze against the inside of the cage. Jorah set a small brazier upon the damp earth. Within, coals glowed orange. Above them he placed a squat iron kettle of scented pine resin. Grey Worm theorized the odor unsettled lesser whites. Perhaps it might loosen a walker's tongue, if the creature possessed such. Jorah met its eyes. Violet met blue, living flame against frozen moon. "You heard men call me Bear," he said quietly. "My queen named me Hand. I carry both titles here." In his palm lay a dragon-glass dagger, blacker than night's own heart. "You understand speech. I saw you direct whites. You think, therefore you choose. Choose now. Speak and see dawn's warmth for another day, or watch this blade find your core." The walker's mouth parted. Wind through hollow canes. That was the sound that issued. A kind of brittle hiss that might once have been a laugh. It tilted its head as if amused by threat. Light glimmered behind its teeth, a refraction of morning through crystal jaw. It pressed gloved hands, if gloves they were, against the dragon-glass chain. Frost bled from the contact. The chain crackled as new ice tried to grow and failed. The walker's gaze flicked to the heart tree's bloody trunk, lingered. Then it spoke. The words were shards, broken Valyrian syllables rasped through frictionless throat. Jorah caught only fragments. Seed, root, burning time, cold unending. But he heard one name clearly. Daenerys. Not Daenerys. Daenerys, the accent Old Valyrian meaning fireborn of conquerors. The walker knew of her. Before he could probe, footsteps squelched behind. Daenerys herself emerged, cloak bright white, trimmed in red leather. She dismissed the unsullied shadowing her with a wave, and stopped beside Jorah. He felt her presence like fresh heat of forge. She rested a hand on his sling and whispered, "I will not let you stand alone with it." The walker watched, eyes narrowing. Daenerys stepped to the chain line. "You know what dragons are," she said, voice ringing with authority that barely needed volume. "Tell me why the winter beneath your skin still stirs after your king is broken. Tell me what power drives you now." Namshawan. The walker's jaw worked. Then words slid out in ancient tongue so cold they feathered the air with rhyme. King's shard fails. Root remains. In caves of ice beneath red snowfield where heart beats still. We serve Root. Jorah translated under breath. Root remains. Beneath red snowfield. Could that be the weeping glacier beyond Skagos? Old rangers reported crimson-streaked ice there, colored by iron-rich sediment. He voiced the thought. Daenerys processed quickly. The Night King was not lone heart, she surmised. A deeper force, call it Root, commands shards, break Root, stormed ice. She focused on Walker. Where is your Root? The creature did not answer directly. It lifted chained hands, palms outward, and uttered a single phrase. Trade. Flame for name. Jorah's stomach tightened. It wants bargain. Daenerys' eyes hardened. Dragonfire for the knowledge to buy its master's death? Lies perhaps. She considered, silence stretching. Finally she knelt, retrieving a thin twig from damp ground. Snapped it. Set pieces on stone lip of brazier. Fire is gift, she said. But gift has shapes. She whispered, Valyria words. Small flame burst atop one twig. The walker leaned, pupils contracting. Firelight reflected inside its gaze like twin coals. It hissed. Daenerys' closed fist, smothered flame. Smoke curled. Name, she demanded. Jorah watched ice trickle from the walker's cuffs. The creature exhaled a sound somewhere between sigh and moan. Igrenar, it spoke. Old tongue, means deep root in songs of children long condemned. Jorah repeated for her. Igrenar. Where? She pressed. Below. The glacial fang. Under river of cracks. Heatless heart, still beats. Break that heart. Frost fades forever. Nan. Glacial fang. Jorah knew only rumor. An upthrust mountain of ice on the edge of the shivering sea, spiked like the jaw of the world. Rangers' maps set it north of Skagos by 100 leagues, far beyond the wall's shadow, where even giants called it death. The walkers slumped, frost building along its arms, as if the giving of name drained it, or as if chains sensed vow fulfilled and tightened a burning. Jorah plunged dagger into earth, and signaled Unsullied to drag Walker back to Iron Wagon, destined for crypt cellars. He doused brazier, resin smoke dissipating. Council that evening convulsed with the revelation. Ruling lords of the north crowded the great hall. Samwell laid scrolls recounting legends of ice heart forging, of children of the forest binding spirits into rivers of frozen fire as last defense against eldest drakes. Tyrion rubbed temples, muttering that worlds within worlds proved more treacherous than political webs. Jon stood before hearth, snowmelt dripping from wolf pelt. If Root lies beneath glacial fang, that is beyond any keep. We must assemble expedition able to march quick and kill quicker. Yes. Davos shook head. Not armies. Supplies cannot follow. We'd starve. Then a strike force, Sansa countered. With dragons above, skiffs along coast to resupply by sea. Eastwatch Harbor still half ruined, but the tideway to Skagos could take shallow keels. Daenerys listened, weighing. When silence lulled, she spoke. I will fly Drogon. Rhaegal near full strength again. If Ygrinar dies to dragonfire, so be it. But our fires must reach caverns beneath ice. That means ground entry. The hand will lead. Jorah met her eyes. No fear flickered. A dozen spears of dragonglass, Jon's Valyrian blade. Sam's maesters know of wildfire. We could carry small casks, shatter Root's crypt. Grey Worm stepped forward. Unsullied, shield your backs. Tyrion raised brow. Some gifted negotiator I am. Spent my life wielding words. Now we face magic that yawns at language. Yet I'll sail with your skiffs. Someone must mine stores. Sansa surprised them by volunteering Glover archers. She would hold Winterfell and guard civilians. The realm will need a hearth when you return, she said. Preparations unfurled swift. Smiths poured days forging dragonglass spear tips, weighting shafts with iron to withstand sub-zero strikes. The citadel crates of wildfire, arrived escorted by knights of the gate. The green liquid within bronze eggs sloshed menacingly whenever cartwheels bumped. Sam supervised packing each in straw and led boxes bound with wool against freeze. Rhaegal's harness rewoven, Viserion grounded still but healing. Drogon preened restless, scales bright as coals smolder. Daenerys visited him nightly, stroking healed tear along wing, murmuring where only he might hear. Jorah, watching, felt shy intrusion, yet she welcomed him when she finished, leaning into his good shoulder. In torch glow, her silver hair flickered jam-tinted from reflection of wildfire casks. "If I fall at Fang," she said once, quiet, "take dragons south. Build Council of Kingdoms. Break wheel without me." He answered by lifting her hand to lips. "We break no wheels. We build new roads, and you will walk them." They set forth under a diluted sun that gave less warmth than a dying ember. 30 riders. Jon Snow, ghost padding silent, Grey Worm, and 20 unsullied chosen for stamina. Torrin Reed and Crannog trackers. Samwell, too round yet determined, a satchel of obsidian arrowheads over shoulder. 3 Glover archers, and Jorah. Overhead flew Drogon and Rhaegal. Far offshore, ships of Yara Greyjoy shadowed with black sails reefed, hugging seas their hulls could manage, ferrying grain and spare blankets, awaiting signal flares. Past last hearth, the world grew alien. Pines dwindled to scrub, then to twisted black stumps. Rivers ran beneath skins of crystal. To drink them required puncturing surface and scooping shards away. Nights shimmered with pale curtains that hissed faintly, and each man woke second hourly to ensure they were not dreams of death reaching. On 4th day, the sky fell. It began as distant rumble like surf, though sea lay silent 50 leagues east. Jorah glanced upward, expecting stormbank, but clouds parted to reveal blank vault. Except far north, a vertical ribbon of darkness descending. Not cloud, not smoke. A wall of ash and powder snow thrown high by unknown quake. The ground jumped. Horses screamed. Ghost bared fangs at emptiness. Dragons roared caution and banked higher. Moments later, wind smashed the column sideways. A hurricane of frost and shale roared across plain, devouring horizon. Jorah thrust his scarf around nose. "Shelter!" he yelled, pointing at low ridgelines of tumbled stone half buried in drift. They scrambled into shallow gullies as white blow engulfed them. Snow shards slapped like thrown glass. Visibility shrank to arm's length. World turned gray static. Inside the maelstrom, shapes moved, angular, jerky. Whites caught in same storm, tossed like rag puppets yet reassembling inexorably. One lunged at Grey Worm. Obsidian spear punched through its mouth. Another seized Sam by pack. Jon's wolf tore it apart. Air grew so cold breath froze on mustaches before second exhale. Jorah felt the ache in healed shoulder sharpened to iron nail. He pressed back to stone, shielding 2 unsullied from flying debris. Time lost cohesion. Perhaps minutes, perhaps hours later, hush descended as quickly as fury arrived. Above, the column dissolved. They stepped out. Dunes of new powder reshaped the plain, obliterating tracks. But further now, barely visible, rose a mountain-like crystal dragon tooth. Glacial fanged dots. Dawn tinted its spire rose gold. At its base a scar gaped, cavern mouth. The storm had been Ygrinar's sentinel. A fallen walker's corpse lay near, half buried. Its chest cavity open, hollow, rootless now. Jorah cut away a piece of its horn circlet as sample. When he lifted it, the fragment dissolved into vapor. He blinked ice tears from lashes, the image of dissolving authority stirring unsteady hope. They marched. From a distance Fang appeared single pillar, but as they neared its cliffs, they saw buttresses of fused ice and rock, arches bridging fissures, stalactites big as towers. Wind moaned through them like organ pipes. At foot of north face, the great scar of entry sloped downward. No watchers showed, yet air chilled further. Dragons landed near grotto, wings mantled as if shielding from unseen arrows. Daenerys slid down Drogon's shoulder. She wore a burnished breastplate, etched with three-headed dragon. Jorah approached. Touch of her gauntlet through his wool gloves steadied him. "We end it this day," she murmured. Jon produced a coil of rawhide rope and iron pitons. Grey Worm distributed torches dipped in whale oil. Sam passed out obsidian knives coated lightly in wax to keep from shattering with first parry. Jorah stowed 2 daggers, a backup short sword, and 1 wildfire egg in wicker pack cushioned by sheepskins. He prayed to Old Bear's memory that he'd need unleash it only at deepest heart. They entered. Light failed quickly, torches hissed. Underfoot ice charred black by torch smoke revealed sediment layers like rings of ancient tree. Patterns resembled frozen ripples, as though water once flowed and froze mid-wave. Tunnel bent downward in corkscrew. Far ahead, a faint blue luminescence pulsed inside walls. Frozen veins, of some mineral perhaps, or magic blood. Kilns of frost lined alcoves. Within each lay frozen shapes. Animals, men, giants, perfectly preserved, eyes open. They passed a mammoth calf curled as if sleeping. A kraken hatchling. A child of the forest with bark-like skin cracked, but eyes still bright amber behind glaze. Sam whispered silent prayer. Torches spat. At last stairs cut from greenish ice led into a cathedral cavern. Ceiling lost in dark, but crystalline pillars soared, refracting torchlight into starlight sprays that danced across floor. Down its center ran a trench of opaque azure, the river of cracks the walker spoke. It did not move, yet a resonant throb hummed through souls. Jorah realized the entire glacier vibrated like slow heartbeat. On far side rose a dais of layered ice, upon which squatted a growth that defied easy description. Part tree root, part visceral heart, its surface rippling with motifs of leaves and veins, yet gleaming translucent. Within its bulbous lobes floated motes of pale light, swirling like slow fireflies in amber. Frost steam spiraled from vent pores. Around its base knelt 4 walkers in silent vigil. They did not rise. Yet behind them, along cavern walls, figures stirred. Dozens. A reserve of guardians dormant until triggered. Daenerys exhaled. Her breath curled smoky. She stepped forward, voice ringing high Valyrian. "I Daenerys, storm-born of House Targaryen. Your winter ends today." The root surface rippled, luminous motes whirled. One walker lifted blade, pointed at her heart. Rhaegal shrieked behind, sound amplified monstrously inside vault. Jon signaled archers. Obsidian shafts flew, catching 2 walkers who shattered. Dormant guardians snapped awake. Whites poured from alcoves. Battle overcame thought. Unsullied formed phalanx front. Grey Worm barked counts, spears thrusting. Ghost bounded through ranks, hamstringing foes. On dais, remaining walkers summoned shards from air. One spear grazed Drogon's throat scale. The dragon inhaled, flame billowed, yet the cavern's cold swallowed much heat. Burning whites crunched still. Sam's sling hurled obsidian bombs that splintered like starbursts. Jorah ran a dot. He sprinted through melee, ducking under walker javelin that hissed overhead. Arrows of blue ice whizzed. He reached dais stairs, slashing white that lunged. Jon joined him, long claw clanging walker blade. At Ygrinar's rim, heatless vapor coiled around them. Jorah tugged wildfire egg free. Glassy bronze stung his gloved palms, warmth humming. He and Jon met eyes. Together, Snow muttered. They drove blades into the root's pulsing bark. Obsidian bit deep. Long claws Valyrian edge carved with ringing scream. Frost bloomed along steel, but did not dull cut. The root shrieked. No sound, but wave of pressure that rattled teeth and cracked torches. Light inside lobes flared white, then reddened faintly, as if blood for first time in millennia. A walker vaulted atop dais, swinging cleaver of crystal at Jon's neck. Jorah intercepted with sling arm, steel meeting ice. Pain shot shoulder but held. Jon twisted decapitated foe. Another walker rushed. Daenerys slid past, thrusting spear of fused dragonbone through its sternum. Now, Jorah gasped. He smashed wildfire egg against fissure and root. Bronze ruptured. Green fire vomited forth. In living world, wildfire ignited at spark. Here the very air seemed spark. Flame whooshed into the root's hollow tubes. The heart lit like smolder glass, veins glowing emerald. Cavern thrummed. Whites faltered mid-stride, limbs jerking spasm. In guardian lines, eyes flickered. Some extinguishing. Snowflakes overhead melted, falling as warm rain. Root convulsed. Splinters shot out, slicing Jorah's cheek anew. He stumbled back, yanking Daenerys with him. Joey ducked. Jon covered retreat, deflecting icicle bolts now aimless. Too much wildfire might collapse vault above, bury them in molten ice. Jorah seized Daenerys' elbow. "Fly," he begged. But Drogon could not fit corridor. They needed exit scried quickly. Grey worm noted opening fissure behind root. Steam vent splitting open to star-flecked sky beyond mountainside. Rhaegal lunged forward, clawing passage bigger. Jon hoisted Sam bodily across rubble. Unsullied withdrew in order, casualties minimal but eyes wide. Ygrinar's glow surged to blinding nova, then imploded. Shockwave rolled outward like thunder, extinguishing torches, hurling whites into pillars where they shattered. Walkers exploded into hail of icicles. The heart shell cracked. Shards raining. The icy river across floor liquefied in seconds, water rushing, swirling. Jorah and Daenerys ducked through rent wall onto ledge, high above tide of gray sea. Wind knifed. Flakes melted in sudden warm eddy, rising from dying glacier. Drogon battered stone to clear platform. One by one survivors scrambled onto dragon back or into Rhaegal's claws. Jorah last, looked back. Inside cavern, Ygrinar diminished. White flame replaced by dim ruddy glow as wildfire burned out. But at core, a dark void shone. Absence palpable. Roots curled inward, shriveling like spider legs. Snow on slopes below sloughed off as mountain exhaled. Jorah leapt, clutching Drogon's heave scale. They launched. Behind them, glacial fang shattered. Thunderclap roared across waste. An avalanche of glittering ruin cascaded into shivering sea, sending tsunamis racing to distant lonely shores. The Winter's Tower tumbled piece by piece, until only a broken stump remained rimmed in steam, rising off heated sea. Dragon's Bank south. Wind smelled cleaner, like rain on stone hearth. Jorah felt shoulder wound bleed anew, but pain dulled to afterthought when he realized the endless hum of cold at world's edges had stilled. An eerie hush enveloped territory below. White knots still roamed likely, but their generals were ash and water. 7 days' journey back carried strange balm. Where once frost devoured hoofprints, now slush followed steps. The aurora faded, replaced by ordinary northern stars. At dusk on last day, they topped a rise, and saw Winterfell's towers lit orange by lanterns. And above them, for first time in living memory, genuine soft rain, falling, not snow. The city erupted when dragons alighted. Small folk surged from gates, kneeling in mud, clutching children who pointed skyward at giants of legend to become protectors. Sansa met them at gatehouse. Her eyes, normally pale blue, shone with tears. Jon embraced her. Muddy cloak soaked her gown. Grey worm saluted. Expression unreadable, but shoulders relaxed, perhaps first time since Astapor. Daenerys stood upon parapet and told them, "The root of winter is broken. I do not promise sun tomorrow or roses, but the breath you draw now no ice will steal." Crowds answered with roar. One part joy, one part disbelief. Jorah watched faces. Some remained wary, but many looked upon Queen with awe untainted by fear. In Great Hall that night, under banners newly cleaned, lords and free folk mixed as had not for centuries. Freys drank with umbers. Manderleys toasted Dothraki, whose braids unraveled now in humid air. Maester Gella tended Jorah's reopened gash. She joked the hand collected more scars than raven feathers. Daenerys approached, as stitches tied. "I will hold council at dawn. Sleep," He smiled. After 4 days' march, sleep outranks thrones. Her hand lingered on his shoulder. Gentle reassurance. Morning council drew a dozen northern lords, ironborn captains, representatives from Vale. Reach Riverlands, come north during war's lull. Tyrion read dispatches. Snowfall decreasing across neck. Refugees from east crossing to Dreadfort's ruins without white pursuit. King's Landing fractured but suitors for peace abundant. Jon addressed assembly. Night King is slain. Whites scatter brainless, hunters mop them, yet realm starves. Planting must begin now. Daenerys nodded. We release grain from Summer Sea Fleet to northern holds. Reach lords will share seeds and barter for fishing rights off White Harbor. My dragons will speed thaw by clearing river ice near mills. Sansa added what next hearts desired, a great council to forge new compact of thrones, or lack of them. People are weary of one chair ruling all. Let each kingdom send electors and shape rule equal. Murmurs followed. Some lords would cling to old fealty, others eager for new breath. Tyrion turned to Jorah. Words of bear may sway those on fence. He rose, leaning heavier on sound arm than he wished. I was exiled for breaking Westerosi law, he began, eyes sweeping lords. I sold poachers to slavers. Crime I regret. My father begged mercy for me. Realm denied. Yet exile led me across seas, where I saw chains broken by a dragon queen. I saw men of 1,000 tongues fight shoulder to shoulder because she freed them first. She might have conquered by fear. Instead, she offered trust, first to traitor like me, then to the world. If we choose old wheel, winter may end, yet injustice will rise anew. Let us choose road instead, each realm free to steer, stones laid by mutual charter, not by iron sword. Nan? He finished. Silence stretched. Then Lord Serwyn, whose father died at Red Wedding, stood. I owe debts of blood to none here, yet I drank Queen's grain last winter. I saw her dragons spare my daughter's pony when they might have eaten. If this hand vouches peace, Serwyn supports counsel. More voices followed. Fen, Nori, Dustin. Yara Greyjoy pledged longships to guard coasts but nothing else. Freedom for Ironborn. Tyrion suggested Ironborn autonomy within trade pacts. Davos argued Dornish seat, though Dorne had held aloof. Raven promised its presence. So they set date. Midsummer at Harrenhal, still smoke-scarred halls. Neutral ground mid-river. If factions could not unite there, at least their echoes might shake old ghosts free. Weeks bled into months. Spring advanced. Fields turned emerald. At White Harbor, freedmen hauled fish crates under gull cries. At Winterfell, saplings sprouted in Godswood where Walker once knelt. Red leaves unfurled like fresh wounds healing. Dragons basked on battlements, wings half spread, dozing in sun that actually warmed scale for first time. Jorah's shoulder healed, though he would never again raise shield above head without remembering Iceblade. He sparred with Unsullied to regain reach, taught Dothraki proper spear guard, advised Glover masons on reinforcing Queen's Road bridges. Most nights he dined with Daenerys and small inner circle. Their laughter came easier now, though shadows lingered behind smiles, memories of lost. One dusk, roaming walls, he found Sansa taught. She spoke of burdens of rule, asked of Meereen's schooling for freed children. He promised scribes to teach northern orphanages. She thanked, expression soft beneath torch. He attended Sam's marriage to Gillian Godswood. Ghost served as ring-bearer, carrying leather pouch. Davos officiated, half serious, half amused. Northern wildflowers lined aisle. Dragons soared overhead at ceremonies close, scattering petals in downwash that fluttered like snow warmed by sunlight. Harrenhal council approached. Daenerys petitioned Jorah to ride with advance host, ensure ruins stabilized for influx. He traveled with Tyrion, Brienne representing Sansa, Podrick now knight, and a train of stonemasons. The ruins still smelled of burnt lime even decades after Aegon's fire. They erected pavilions among collapsed towers, hung banners of each kingdom equidistant. Delegates arrived. Prince Corin Martell from Dorne, Lady Olenna's grandniece Isara Tyrell guiding thin-reach retinue. Even one Lannister, Joanna, distant cousin of Jaime, seeking restoration of Lion Pride under equal crown. Stormland sent Edric Storm, grown into tall, broad-shouldered lord. Day the council opened. Summer storm rattled windows. Within shattered hall, they placed round dais carved from black oak, equal seats. Daenerys entered last on foot. No crown, only cloak embroidered, with all realm sigils interwoven. Murmurs stilled. She spoke. This realm bled for weal, forged by conquest. Let us forge anew, melt spokes, shape plowshares. Debate roared for days. Some feared dragons still overshadow fairness. Jon, present as king of free North, argued dragons were swords sheathed. Jorah sat behind Daenerys, fielding logistic questions, mediating disputes of grain quotas, reminding Vale Knights that sky cells remain empty when bellies full. Tyrion thrived, quips diffusing tension. Mid-session word came. Last white nest destroyed near ruins of Hardhome by wildlings and Night's Watch remnants. North erupted cheer. Sealers celebrated by gifting barrels of seal oil to each delegate, which stank but symbolized unity. On 10th dawn, charters drafted. Each kingdom would elect warden to sit on seasonal synod, rotate high stewardship annually. The dragons, capital D, would bear no inheritable rule. Rather, they existed as shared guardians, flown by whichever rider the synod appointed master of skies. Daenerys offered her riders, but insisted choice remain councils. People gasped at abdication. Ceremony signed, sealed by melted dragon glass, wax.die. When Daenerys placed quill down, audience exhaled collective wind, as though wheel truly broken. That evening, as stars shimmered over God's eye, Daenerys walked ramparts of Harrenhal's half-collapsed Kingspire with Jorah. Cicadas hummed, and lake mirrored constellations. She said, "I gave away throne yet gained world." Strange? He replied, "A dragon's worth measured not in gold but horizon broadened." She laughed softly. "And what of bear's worth? Mine measured in steps taken at queen's side until breath ends." She turned, tears glistening. "I cannot restore your lands, Jorah. Synod votes them to distant kin." He shrugged. "Land weighed less than freedom. I hold both hands." She drew nearer. "Then share them." Her lips brushed scar on his cheek. He closed eyes. Against ruin's jagged shadow, they kissed as night jars fluttered overhead. Years later, histories would call it the Spring Council and mark new calendar from that day. Children learning script would draw broken wheel and dragon above buds. Songs would name Jorah Mormont Shield of Hearths, recount his stand at Glacial Fang, though he grumbled that Bard's exaggerated shoulder wound to size of dire wolf bite. He never did return to Bear Island as Lord D.I. Instead, he traveled south as Hand to Itinerant Queen, founding schools where dragons once sowed fear. Together, they oversaw levees of Trident, reclaimed fields of crownlands, planted cedar groves along Blackwater to prevent flood. When plague flickered in Old Town, Jorah personally escorted healers with jars of wildfire-purged salve, memory of grayscale, informing cure. On one summer's cusp, he stood atop Marine's old pyramid again, rebuilt into library of freed tongues. Children recited alphabets beneath banners of bear and dragon, entwined. Daenerys found him there, hair streaked with threads of gray now. She teased that he looked older and wiser than old Nan. He answered that he felt younger each time he saw a page turn in Child's book. They watched sunset over Bay of Dragons, now Bay of Dawn, named by freedmen to mark both daybreak and breaker of chains. Sea reflected sky fiery rose. No horns of war, only gull cries and distant laughter from quays markets. Jorah exhaled. For first time since leaving Bear Island decades before, his heart felt entirely unclenched. He traced scar on cheek with absent thumb. Symbol of infection survived. World scars, he realized, could heal too, if burn hot enough to cauterize yet not consume. And in Queen beside him, he saw flame mastered, held inside lambent vessel, still fragile yet unbroken. "Tell me a story," she whispered, leaning into his arm. He began. "Once there was a girl born in storm, and a man who walked alongside storms." His words drifted into dusk. Lamps lit below, like stars fallen to earth. Night breeze carried scent of papyrus and ink, forged smoke and sea salt, yet overlaying all a fragrance delicate and strong, hope grown in thawed soil. Beyond horizon, ships carried grain to distant holds, ravens ferried letters of council decisions, and somewhere deep memory of Ygranor sank further beneath warming waves, where it would trouble living no longer. But the living remembered, as scars remember blades, to guard flame kindly, wielded only to banish night, and when dawn came, to pause and breathe its gold, before marching on. And so Jorah's tale did not end but unfolded, in each hearth relit, each field sown, each dragon's wing casting shade over children who would never fear shadow, only marvel at wonder. He finished story with quiet line meant only for her. And they lived in work and love, as long as world allowed. She smiled, pressing forehead to his, and under blaze of twin moons, all storms that had launched their hearts were at last distant, quiet swells on horizon of new sea. The years that followed the breaking of Ygranor and the Spring Council passed not with the smoothness of legend, but with the jagged, real rhythm of life, rebuilding itself after cataclysm. In the north, the blackened earth, where fire and ice had waged war, began, cautiously, to heal. The first spring after the glacial fang cracked was neither gentle nor untroubled. A late frost scorched buds. Rivers ran fierce with meltwater, and it was said that old ghosts, giants, children of the forest, others unnamed, drifted restlessly beneath thawing snowdrifts, not ready to leave a world they had once defended, ruled, or haunted. Jorah Mormont carried the ache of that long winter in the sinew of his shoulder, and in the ache of every joint when rain threatened. But his spirit surprisingly grew lighter as the world did. It was not that the burdens of rule or war faded. Indeed, each day brought new demands. A realm no longer subject to one iron throne, but to a council of competing kingdoms, each jealously guarding its own customs, boundaries, and wounds. Yet something in the endless labor, the planting of fresh fields, the rebuilding of shattered villages, the endless patient negotiation of peace, soothed the man who had once wandered a continent in self-imposed exile, lost to shame. Daenerys, no longer queen of the Seven Kingdoms, moved through her new world like a woman breathing air after years underwater. She was rarely still. Each season saw her somewhere new. Winterfell one month, the Eyrie the next, then Storm's End, Sunspear, or across the narrow sea to the Bay of Dawn, where the freedmen of Meereen, Astapor, and Yunkai still called her Mesa and pressed garlands of flame-petaled flowers into her hands. She rode Drogon less often as the years went on, but when she did, it was with the wild joy of a hawk loosed above summer fields, rather than the steel-edged purpose of war. Together, Jorah and Daenerys established the Dragon Road, a route of free passage from Skagos to Dorne, patrolled by loyalists from every land, where travelers could find shelter, food, and honest justice. In the heart of the north, a new school was built on Bear Island. Lady Lyanna's will, drafted with the certainty of one who did not expect to live long, had left a tract of land to be used for the teaching of children. Free and bastard, bear and no bear alike. Jorah returned to dedicate the first stone, his words simple. Here, no child will fear the shadow of a whip or hunger for words. He never claimed lordship again. Lyanna's younger cousins ruled the island well, and Jorah found more joy in teaching. First the children of Bear Island, then those of the newly rebuilt Deepwood Motte, and when letters from distant lords arrived, even in the south, he wrote primers on letters and numbers, histories that spoke not just of kings and battles, but of the long, slow work of rebuilding, of the victories won when a field yielded double, when a sick child survived, when two rival houses shared a market without drawing swords. Daenerys' council, half lords, half commons, grew with the years. Tyrion, ever sly, found himself happier in administration than in rule. Samwell Tarly became both healer and historian, overseeing a new order of maesters that valued healing, learning, and equal service above the old oaths to the citadel. Gilly, now Lady Tarly, ran the inns and orphanages of Horn Hill with a gentle ferocity that made even rough sellswords bow their heads in respect. Yet the legacy of the dead lingered. In the early years, wildlings and freedmen patrolled the haunted forest north of the Wall, hunting wights still shambling without purpose. Jon Snow, once king in the north, now simply Jon, refused all titles, wandering the gift and the far north with Ghost at his side. Some whispered he met with the last of the giants, that he spoke with the old gods in dream and waking, that his word alone kept uneasy peace among peoples who remembered too well what came before. On Bear Island, one winter's evening, Jorah found himself standing by the sea, the wind keening over rocks, his hair silvered, not by frost but by years. He watched 3 children, one dark-haired and sturdy, one slim and red-haired, one a laughing girl whose skin glowed copper bronze in the dusk, leap over tidal pools, shrieking with delight. Daenerys, standing beside him in a plain wool dress, smiled, her hair braided simply, a few strands whipping loose in the wind. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly, voice nearly lost in the surf. "Regret?" Jorah tasted the word. "No, not anymore. I grieved, for my father, my name, for the years I wandered, yes, but not for this. Not for you. Not for the world we built." She slid her hand into his. "It was a terrible price. All great things are." He squeezed her fingers. But it was not paid alone. Below them, on the wind-torn beach, the children made a game of the tide, building a dragon of pebbles and driftwood, then shrieking with laughter as the foam tore it down. Daenerys laughed too, and the sound was so light, so free of shadow, that Jorah felt something long wound within him finally loosen. Sometimes, on clear nights, Drogon would still take to the sky, launching from the cliffs in a whirl of black wings. Children and adults alike would gather in fields to watch the dragon's silhouette slip between stars, a remnant of myth, alive in a world learning painfully how to live without the constant threat of fire or frost. Letters arrived from every kingdom, Dorne asking for advice on irrigation, the Reach on crops, the Vale seeking lessons in diplomacy, the Iron Islands in navigation. Each time, Daenerys would read them at the long table they'd set in what was once the great hall of Mormont Keep, now a schoolhouse. Tyrion sent riddles. Arya, far in Braavos or beyond, sent tales of wonders seen. Sansa, now Warden of the North, sometimes rode north alone, hair bound against the wind, her council left to rule in her absence. On the rare nights when peace settled on the island, a hush so deep that the only sounds were the sea, the rustle of pines, and the slow breath of sleeping dragons, Jorah would sit by the fire, Daenerys' head on his shoulder, and speak softly of the world that was, the world that is, and the world they hoped might yet be. It was not perfect. There were quarrels, old hatreds rekindled, seasons of blight and flood. But there were also new births, songs sung in halls that once echoed only with the footfalls of soldiers. The Bear and the Dragon, so the children called them, became not only a sigil, but a lesson. The strong could protect without ruling. The wise could teach without boasting. And wounds, if tended with care and patience, could knit into scars that, in time, made a people stronger, kinder, and free. When Daenerys' hair at last turned to silver wholly, and Jorah's steps grew slow, they watched their children and grandchildren run through the wildflowers on the cliffs. And they knew the work was never done, that every dawn brought new labor, new hope, new risk. But neither feared sleep nor the coming dark. For the spring they had forged endured, as all living things must endure, imperfect, stubborn, sometimes battered, but always pushing toward the next green shoot, the next bright day, the next chance to build a world worth leaving behind. And in the song that lingered, sung by children beside the sea long after their bones had returned to the earth, the Bear and the Dragon lived on, guardians of hearth and hope, silent but unyielding as the tide, as the dawn, as the promise at the heart of every true story, that from fire and frost both, new life might all somehow begin. Oh no. Years wove themselves into the fabric of the realm, each thread marked by the labor of mending and the soft resistance of memory. History, once hammered by war and fire, now unfolded with the slow patience of moss, reclaiming stone, of rivers carving new banks, of the living carving meaning from what remained. The story of Jorah Mormont and Daenerys, of council instead of crown, of fields and schools in place of swords and siege, became not only a legend whispered to children, but the lived, imperfect reality of Westeros in the age after dragons and darkness. In the north, as summer pressed on and autumn crept from the woods, the land continued to heal itself. Fields that had been burnt black or drowned in ice sent up bold green shoots. Manderly ships, no longer laden with war, ferried grain and iron, salted fish and wool between White Harbor and Bear Island. At Deepwood Mud, apples the size of fists hung from branches in such abundance that farmers traveled from as far as Old Town to taste them. There were setbacks, hailstorms, a blight of beetles that gnawed new barley shoots, feuds between houses old and new. But there was a sense, sometimes unspoken, sometimes as clear as laughter on a market day, that the wheel truly was broken. The land itself was spinning a gentler story. Jorah Mormont found his days governed less by the clash of arms and more by the slow demands of building, teaching, and remembering. His mornings began with lessons in the schoolhouse of Bear Island. Children and adults crowded onto rough-hewn benches, eager for stories of the world beyond their shores, of the distant Bay of Dawn, of dragons and freedmen, and the war that broke the night. His voice, graveled with age and scar, held the room with the same quiet command it once brought to battlefield and council alike. When he spoke of the price of peace, of the need for patience and kindness, even the most restless of the bear cubs stilled. Some afternoons he rode south, guiding new crops into wet ground, or walked the cliffs with Daenerys, who remained the brightest and most restless spirit on the island. She never lost the habit of scanning horizons, of listening to winds for a note of trouble. Her hands bore calluses from farm work, and her laughter, rich and sudden, would scatter birds from their perches. When she traveled, it was always with purpose. To help settle a dispute over fishing rights, to oversee the construction of a new bridge, or to comfort a mother who had lost a child. She wrote letters every night, advice, encouragement, small gifts of wisdom and hope, to distant friends and allies. Sansa in Winterfell, Sam and Gilly at Horn Hill, Tyrion in the Reach, Jon wherever he might be found, wandering the wild places that now needed guardians more than kings. Dragons, too, became less a force of war than an emblem of change. Drogon's wings cast shadows over Bear Island, only rarely now, for his flights were less frequent as the years passed. But every summer, when the sun hung low and honey thick in the sky, he would rise, trailing clouds of smoke and sparks, circling high above the island, a living memory of the days when fire of the world trembled. Children ran to the cliffs, eyes wide, faces smeared with berry juice, waving flags stitched with the bear and the dragon. The old tales lived, but as stories, no longer portents of doom, but reminders of what had been survived. Daenerys and Jorah, partners in peace as they had once been in war, lived simply. Their days were full, less of ceremony than of work and small joys. They hosted markets beneath the old pines, feasts in the new hall built from storm-felled timber, and once every season, a night of story and song. The long table at Bear Island's hall welcomed wildlings and ironborn, Glover and Reed, even merchants from across the narrow sea, each leaving with some new word, a bit of Mormont or Targaryen wisdom, stitched into their own lore. Daenerys baked bread with the wives of fishermen, her hands dusted white. Jorah, at home at his age, played chess with children, taught the old bear dance on festival days, and kept a quiet, steady presence at Daenerys' side. The Council of Kingdoms, its banners tattered, but its bonds resilient, endured. Delegates met thrice yearly, sometimes at Harrenhal, sometimes at Sunspear, once beneath the vaults of the Eyrie. No one realm dominated. Disputes were many, but so were alliances. Where before blood paid for peace, now it was barter, negotiation, and the threat of dragonfire that rarely, if ever, had to be invoked. Tyrion's riddles softened the hard faces of old rivals. Sansa's measured calm bridged north and south. The new generation, the children of Lady Arya, and the silent water dancer who sent rare, vivid letters. Gilly's clever twins, Sam's daughter who could read Valyrian by age 8. The wildling youths with the strength of mountains learned to meet as friends, not foes. In the second decade after the breaking of the wheel, a plague of cough swept the north, and old fears surfaced. The memory of the White Walkers lingered, a bruise on every mind. Yet this time, healers moved swiftly. Maesters trained by Sam, wildling herbalists, and even former Red priests from Essos who had found new purpose in this quieter world. Jorah, too old to travel now, wrote out the recipe for a simple cure learned long ago in the East, and it spread from Bear Island across the kingdoms. The death toll was low, and for the first time in memory, an affliction had been met not with suspicion or swords, but with shared labor and knowledge. It was that autumn, as the first yellow leaves spattered the roads and wild apples fell to the ground, that Daenerys' hair, once silver bright, shone with white, and the fine lines at the corners of her eyes deepened. Smile lines more than the creases of worry. Deepened. Smile lines more than the creases of worry. She moved more slowly, but no less purposefully. On her birthday, the people of Bear Island, with help from White Harbor and Deepwood, built a great dragon of driftwood on the beach. At dusk, with 1,000 candles flickering, Daenerys and Jorah walked the stony shore hand in hand as the children sang and the old bear's drum boomed. When the dragon was lit, its flame cast wild shapes on the surf, and Daenerys turned to Jorah with a joy that for all the years and scars between them had not dimmed. "Will you walk with me?" she asked. "Always," he said, and he meant it not with the desperate promise of youth, but with the enduring surety of those who have outlived war, grief, and regret. They spoke that night of the years behind them and the years ahead, of the children growing up, of the new crops and roads, of the work that would never truly end. They remembered lost friends, Ser Barristan and Grey Worm, Missandei and Viserion, Lyanna and Theon, and many more whose names lived in stories. They made plans for another market, another school, another petition to the council. "The world," Daenerys said, "would always need mending. And I will mend it," she said, "until I cannot. And then you will keep the fire for me." Jorah answered as he always had. "You have been the fire and I the shield. That is enough." Seasons turned again. In the fullness of time, when the fields were gold and the air sweet with the promise of frost, Jorah took to his bed, his breath short but his mind clear. Daenerys sat beside him, her hand folded in his, and the room full of the low murmur of old friends, children, and grandchildren. No throne, no banners, only love. Drogon rested outside, ancient and dreaming, his wing a shadow against the long grass. Jorah's last words were not for the dead, but for the living. "Keep the road open," he whispered to Daenerys. "Never let the night close in again," she promised, pressing her lips to his knuckles, eyes shining not with grief but gratitude. He slipped from the world quietly, as the tide slips from the shore. No storm, no fanfare. Only the memory of long labor and a life made whole in the aftermath of darkness. Daenerys grieved, and then she lived. She lived in the laughter of children, in the baking of bread, in the fierce debates of the council, in the stories told at hearths and in fields, in the love she gave and the hope she inspired. When her own time came years later, it was not as queen, not even as mother of dragons, but as a woman loved and remembered, who had broken a wheel and left a road. On Bear Island, the schoolhouse still stood, its stones weathered by rain, its timbers bright with banners old and new. Each spring, children laid wildflowers at the edge of the cliffs, beneath the cairn where the bear and dragon were carved, entwined. Each autumn, The dragon of driftwood was rebuilt and burned, the flames casting light far out to sea. And so the story endured, not as prophecy, not as warning, but as testament, that even in a world forged by war and ruled by shadow, peace could grow stubborn and slow, tended by scarred hands and the hearts of those who had survived. In the end, the bear and the dragon became the promise and the practice of a world remade, alive in every lesson, every harvest, every song, every sunrise, as long as Westeros endured. And if storms ever came again, there would be roads open, council fires burning, and memories fierce enough to light the night until dawn returned. This, at last, was the true song of ice and fire, carried forward not by kings, but by the people who learned to live beyond their shadows, and by the ones who loved them enough to never let the dark return. Beneath the sky no longer ruled by the menace of snow or smoke, the land drew a new rhythm from the thrum of seasons. Planting, tending, harvest, rest. Winters grew less harsh, or perhaps the people had grown hardier, their warmth against the cold multiplied by all they had endured together. The story of Jorah and Daenerys, of the council and the healing of Westeros, faded from crisis and song into the day-to-day truth of lives being lived, ordinary, stubborn, hopeful. Bear Island's schoolhouse became its heart. Each dawn, children from Mormont and wildling blood alike, from the scattered hamlets of the north and the fishers' huts on the shore, crossed the threshold. The walls inside were rough, but they were painted in bright colors. Dragons and bears, ships and pine trees, the sun rising above a field of wheat. A line of runes, painstakingly carved by Jorah in his last years, wrapped the walls. Each letter a lesson, each word a promise. Learn, question, remember, share, heal. Daenerys herself taught when she was able, sometimes standing at the blackboard with chalk in hand, sometimes simply telling stories. Children sat with eyes wide, watching the woman whose hair was silver now, whose hands bore lines of age and work, but whose gaze remained fierce. She spoke not of conquest, nor of burning cities, but of how to recognize the first wildflowers under late snow, or why a baker measures water with care, or how even the smallest kindness, a rescued sparrow, a shared crust, could change the shape of a day or a life. She told them the story of a man who returned from exile to teach, who found forgiveness in labor, whose scars did not diminish his gentleness or his wisdom. They understood, as children always do, what grown men sometimes forget: that true strength is patient, and that the fire which endures is not the one that burns hottest, but the one that does not go out. Jorah's cairn overlooked the sea. Each spring, Daenerys climbed the steep path with a basket of wildflowers, primrose, star moss, late snowdrops, and laid them at the stone's base. Sometimes she spoke aloud, voice low so only the wind and the gulls could hear. "You would like the new students," she would say. "There is a boy from Hardhome who asks more questions than even Sam's daughter ever did. There's a girl who can run faster than any of the bear cubs. Her mother says she races the seals each morning. I wish you could see them, Jorah." Time blurred and sharpened, as it does in the years that follow great change. The Council of Kingdoms weathered arguments and drought, lean harvests and sudden floods. Disagreements were fierce, but never fatal. Alliances sometimes dissolved, but were rebuilt, usually with more care the second time. Sansa ruled the north with a steady hand, her hair streaked with white, her patience legendary. Arya wrote from lands beyond the sunset sea, parchment splattered with ink, with pressed flowers, with words and languages no maester had ever read before. Samwell Tarly's children grew tall, and Gilly's laughter became a fixture at each spring's council. Tyrion's riddles passed from the lips of lords to the ears of stable boys and street urchins. On the old high road, once rutted by the boots of armies, the new Dragon Road wound south. It was marked by cairns and gardens, each one built by a different hand. Wildling and knight, fisherman and freedman, Dothraki and Corthine, children of the Reach and the Rocky Isles. Along its length, wagons carried books as often as barley, and every few miles stood a small inn or wayhouse, offering bread and warmth to all. It was said that a woman could walk from Skagos to Dorne without fear, and if she grew tired, there was always someone to help her. For the world had learned what it cost to ignore a stranger in need. Drogon, aging but undiminished, became more than legend. Once each summer, at the Festival of Fire, he soared above the island, casting a shadow that sent every heart beating faster with awe and delight. Children danced in his wake, weaving garlands of red and gold to toss toward the sky. Daenerys, her hair wound in braids laced with wildflowers, watched him from the sea cliffs, her face as full of joy as it had been the first time she saw a dragon hatch from flame. Not all was easy. There were still bad seasons, disputes over rivers and rights, the slow ache of old wounds, land made fallow by war, families scattered, griefs too large for words. There were moments when Daenerys would find herself standing in the schoolhouse at dusk, staring at Jorah's empty desk, her hand resting on its worn wood. At such times the past would draw close. The shadow of cities burning, the feel of a sword's hilt, the cold resolve that had once filled her veins. But always, there was a knock at the door. A child needing a story. A mother with a question about crops. A counselor bringing news from afar. The world did not allow her to remain in memory for long, for the living, she knew, required the living. She wrote letters, thousands over the years. Some she sent, some she kept, their pages tied with blue thread. In them she charted the passage of time. The planting of the new orchard, the marriage of Lyanna Mormont's cousin to a merchant's daughter from Bravos, the spring when 2 bear cubs were born in the same den, the old wildling who planted sunflowers along the path to the cairn. In these letters, Daenerys recorded small victories, lessons learned, bridges built, old enemies reconciled, and her own moments of doubt, fear, and stubborn hope. When the time came for her to lay down her work, she did so with grace. She chose her successor not from birthright or blood, but from the children she had taught. A girl who spoke every tongue of the Bay of Dawn in the north, whose hands were clever, whose heart was wide as the horizon. The people called her Fire Seed, for her hair shone gold and copper, and her laughter was quick and kind. The council confirmed her by acclamation, and the land barely skipped a beat. Daenerys spent her last years in the rooms above the schoolhouse, the walls hung with banners faded by sun, shelves lined with gifts from distant places, and windows open to the sound of the sea. She aged with dignity, hair as white as the first frost, eyes still bright. When her strength waned, she let herself be carried to the cliffs to sit beside Jorah's cairn, listening to the tide and the wind. Her last night was quiet. The people of Bear Island kept a vigil, the schoolhouse windows glowing with candlelight, songs sung in many tongues. Valyrian, the old tongue, the common speech. In the hour before dawn, she slept, her hand resting on a book of stories, her face peaceful. Drogon, sensing the end, lifted his head to the sky and let out a cry that echoed for miles: mourning, remembrance, and release. The morning after, Fire Seed stood before the people, bearing Daenerys' staff and Jorah's old brooch, now smoothed by years of touch. She spoke not of thrones or dragons, but of roads and bridges, of the work still to be done, of the world as it was and as it could be. Beneath the cairn, wildflowers grew. Each year, children brought new stones, some carved, some plain, some bearing words or names. Every summer, as Drogon circled overhead, and the people feasted, a song rose, of the bear and the dragon, of the long road, of peace hard won, and never to be taken for granted. The realm changed, as all realms do. Cities grew, others shrank. New alliances formed, old ones faded. Yet the dragon road remained, a living artery of hope. In distant corners, travelers told of a silver-haired woman and a bear-scarred knight who had kindled the dawn, and of those who kept the fire after them. Thus did the song endure, not on banners or in tomes, but in the hands of those who carried it, in the work of mending, in the courage to hope. And when storms gathered, as they always must, the memory of the bear and the dragon guided them through, past the end of an age, into whatever light the next might bring. Over time, the cycles of hardship and peace, of birth and death, became less remarkable than the simple fact that life continued. Layered and ordinary, a tapestry woven from countless threads, no longer dominated by fire or fear. Across Westeros, from the green valleys of the Reach to the wind-blown steppes of the Vale, from the surf-drenched stones of the Iron Islands to the lemon groves of Dorne, a world once racked by storms settled into a deeper, more complicated quiet. On Bear Island, the changes were as visible as the rising and setting sun. No longer a stronghold haunted by its grim history, the island became a crossroads, its harbor busy with merchant cogs and fishing boats, its woods echoing with voices from every corner of the realm and beyond. Once each season, a fleet from the Bay of Dawn anchored offshore, and children in the schoolhouse would run to the pebbled beach to watch the strangers unload bolts of silk, barrels of wine, and, sometimes, letters from places Daenerys herself had once walked. Fireseed, Daenerys' chosen successor, ruled not with decree but with presence, traveling between the island's villages, listening to their needs, mending fences, settling disputes, and always making time to teach. The schoolhouse grew, first with a new wing for older students, then a small observatory atop its roof where, on cloudless nights, children would climb and learn the names of the stars. Each year the lessons shifted, shaped by the needs of the island. Stories and numbers and letters. Yes, but also healing, cooking, fishing, the patient arts of growing food and mending nets, the subtler crafts of listening and forgiving. Daenerys' name became legend, not only on Bear Island, but wherever the road reached. On the night of the Festival of Fire, children wore masks shaped like dragons or painted their faces with bear paws. In the north, women and men who remembered the old queen as a force of dread now spoke of her as the mother of the new order, the one who made it possible for peace to be both sturdy and soft, who taught that justice must not be vengeance. Each year, when the wildflowers bloomed on the cairn, letters arrived from far afield, some addressed simply to the Bear and the Dragon, Bear Island, bearing stories, news, and thanks. Elsewhere, the world adapted. In King's Landing, the old Red Keep was razed and a great public garden took its place. A ring of weirwoods and oaks surrounding the empty stone of what had once been the Iron Throne, now gone to dust and memory. People came not to kneel, but to walk, to rest beneath the boughs, to listen to the wind in the branches, to meet neighbors from other realms. The Council of Kingdoms rotated from city to city, bringing with it feasts, trade, and new friendships. Some years the alliances frayed, but always there were hands to mend the tears. New generations raised on stories of fire, frost, and the slow, deliberate building of trust. The Reach grew richer as trade revived. The riverlands, scarred by old wars, planted new orchards along every river. Dorne, for all its pride, opened its ports to ships from as far as old Volantis and Cork. Even the Iron Islands changed, though more slowly, as some of their children returned from the road with stories of plenty and warmth and the laughter of other peoples. Now and then, storms swept the world, but none undid the work of many hands, the bonds forged on the long, hard journey out of night. On Bear Island, Daenerys' absence was a kind of presence. The schoolhouse windows caught the dawn in just the way she'd loved. The scent of bread at market, the first sound of song in the evenings as the children ran down to the sea, all of it a living echo of her legacy. Firesid visited the cairn on every feast day, tending the wildflowers, replacing stones as needed, retelling stories so they would not fade. In her words, and in the new faces gathered at the table each year, the story of the bear and the dragon persisted, not as doctrine, but as example. Love and courage in the face of sorrow, and the patience to teach and listen long after swords had been set aside. Drogon, ancient, wise-eyed, no longer hunted nor harnessed, still lived on the island's far shore. He seldom soared high now, but sometimes, at sunset, he would glide low over the bay, his wings stirring the waves, a reminder to all who saw him that power could choose to be gentle. The children, unafraid, would race to the water's edge to wave, their laughter trailing on the breeze as Drogon vanished into mist. Some swore that, if you listened, you could hear the old queen's voice in the rush of wings. Fly, make, mend. In the years that followed, the council enacted 100 small changes, none revolutionary, all incremental. Laws were revised so every realm could keep its traditions while remaining part of the whole. Taxes were balanced to prevent either famine or greed. Ships from distant lands found welcome in more harbors each year. A scholar from the Citadel, wandering the roads for her own study, wrote in her journal that the true transformation of Westeros was not wrought by the flame or the sword, but by the slow collective promise to remember what had nearly been lost. The great battles faded into history, their wounds healing, their lessons handed down in the soft form of cautionary tales. The banners of war became the banners of festival, each kingdom adding a new color to the long tapestries that hung in the schoolhouse hall, reminders of the days when the world had come together, however briefly, to cast aside fear. The Red Mountains, the Green Fork, the Blackwater Rush, and the rolling wilds beyond the wall, all flourished, not untouched, but unbroken. Jon Snow, called Ghostwalker now by some, was rarely seen, but now and then a raven would arrive at Bear Island, brief, plain, and unadorned, but always carrying news of the far north. He watched over the wild places, cared for lost travelers, and in the darkest winters, the old folks whispered that he and Ghost guided even the sun's return. Sansa Stark ruled the north as long as her body allowed, then passed the mantle to a council of women and men chosen by both free vote and old custom. Her legacy was quiet, as she had been. Strength in silence, peace in steadiness. As for Jorah's memory, it endured not as that of a hero but as a good man, a teacher, a friend. His name adorned the schoolhouse, but also a bridge over the White Knife, and a small stone marker beside a spring at Deepwood Moat, where he once helped dig a new well. The children spoke of him not as the hand of the queen, but as the man who listened, who showed them how to sharpen a quill or mend a net, who could recite the names of every bird on the island and explain why each song mattered. One late autumn, many years after both Jorah and Daenerys had gone to rest, Firesteed found a letter tucked among the old broadsheets in the library. The paper was thin and worn, but the ink was bright, the handwriting familiar. She read, "The world in the end is not changed by fire, nor kept whole by ice. It is mended by hands, scarred, calloused, gentle. If you remember this and teach others, then neither night nor storm nor the memory of sorrow will ever truly prevail." D. Firestead copied the words, not into a book of law, but onto the walls of every school that bore her name. The years stretched. The world changed. Slowly, stubbornly, beautifully. On the longest night of each year, when the winds howled across the island and the stars shone clear, the people of Bear Island and all who traveled the Dragon Road would light lanterns and send them skyward. Each light was a promise, to keep watch, to remember, to teach, to forgive, to never let the night close in again. Far above, where the cliffs met the sea, the cairn stood, stone and dragon entwined, wildflowers blooming in the cold. Travelers came from every land, bringing pebbles, coins, letters, songs, tears. The story of the bear and the dragon lived on not because it was myth, but because it had become the most stubborn truth in all the world. That peace, like spring, is never won, only tended, seed by seed, hand by hand, heart by heart. And so, even as the world aged and new storms threatened on distant horizons, the fire that Daenerys and Jorah had kindled burned on, not in the blaze of war, but in the quiet glow of lamps in windows, in laughter after supper, in lessons patiently given, in the songs of children playing on the shore. The story never ended. It only changed, as all living things do, and endured. In the lingering hush that followed years of storms, Bear Island became a living testament to the world's rebirth. A place where memory and hope met daily beneath the sweep of wind and wing. Each season deepened the changes seeded by Jorah and Daenerys, until the cadence of their long labor echoed in every ritual, every hearth, every field that trembled beneath the slow push of new roots. The schoolhouse zones, laid by freed hands and guided by old stories, warm through even the longest winters now, its windows aglow each evening with lamplight and the soft rise of voices in song and learning. Fireseed, grown into her role as both leader and teacher, had begun inviting elders from every corner of Westeros, crannogmen and stonemasons, Dothraki storytellers and maesters from Old Town, wildling weavers and even far-off Braavosi, to share their wisdom. The island's children heard tales of the Shivering Sea and Summer Isles, learned the shapes of distant alphabets, the herbs that soothed fevers, and the dances that marked weddings in the far south. Knowledge, once the rare province of the few, became the coin of the land, passed from hand to hand, growing in value with each new bearer. Daenerys' shadow stretched long, but never heavy. Her portrait hung in the schoolhouse, painted in her final years, hair unbound, shoulders squared in a homespun cloak, smile soft but wry, as if she were about to interrupt the artist and laugh at herself. At every festival, her favorite story was told anew, not of the sack of cities, but of the time she taught the island's smallest children to swim in the shallow bay, splashing with unrestrained joy. Silver hair streaming in the sun, a living promise that the world could be gentle and kind and new. Drogon lived, vast and slow with age, in a cove beyond the eastern headland. His scales had dulled, his eyes grown clouded, but still he would, on warm afternoons, rise and glide above the pine forests, the younger children shrieking with delight and racing after his shadow. Some nights, after the lessons were done and the island was quiet, Fireseed would climb the path to his resting place. There she would sit among the rocks, reading aloud stories from across the world. Old sagas of Nymeria and Garth Greenhand, new verses written by Bear Island's own children, songs from the Rhoynar and tales of distant Yeti. Drogon listened, slow and intent, and the night was always still. In the wider world, the Council of Kingdoms entered its third generation. Its meetings now less formal than they had been, but no less vital. In White Harbor, banners flew for the Autumn Council, each one representing not only a kingdom, but the trade, marriages, and ideas that bound the lands together. Sansa's descendants presided in the north with quiet dignity, each new warden trained in the old patience. In the Riverlands, green fields flourished, crisscrossed by new canals, and dotted with stone-walled villages. In Dorne, orchards spread inland, their fruits traded for wool, iron, and tales. The Iron Islands, never quite at ease, sent younger sons and daughters to learn at Bear Island School, and some returned home to found new fisheries and open their harbors to strangers for the first time in memory. On the Dragon Road, wayhouses grew into towns. What had been a network of lanterns and stones, lit each night by a different hand, marked with carvings of dragons and bears, became a chain of communities, places where no one went hungry or unwelcomed. Journeys once perilous became pilgrimages. Not of conquest, but of learning, of seeing the world that had survived and changed. Old knights came to share their memories. Children from Essos and the Summer Isles brought their own languages and games, weaving them into the fabric of Westeros until there was no thread uncolored by new voices. Among the teachers, a few remembered Jorah Mormont, not as the Hand, nor the exiled son, but as the gentle voice who once sat with a frightened child in the hall's darkest corner and coaxed a song from her lips. His stories outlasted him, whispered at every fireside, of a bear who protected what he loved not by might, but by patience, of a man who, when given a second chance, made it his life's work to give others the same. On his cairn, the stones grew thick with moss and sea wind lichen, but the carved bear and dragon, wound in a circle of wildflowers, stood clear and bright. Each year, on the longest day, the whole island, and many who had come by boat or road, gathered on the western cliffs to greet the sunset. Songs rose in a dozen languages. Children acted out the history of the bear and the dragon. The long march across the Bay of Dawn, the breaking of the wheel, the first planting of spring wheat after the final winter. Some years the tale ended with laughter and dancing, other years with tears and silence for those lost. Always there was fire, A dragon of driftwood burned on the stones, its embers rising as the stars kindled. In the old godswood, the heart tree, once silent through centuries of sorrow, now bore ribbons of blue and gold, tokens left by children for the lost, the hopeful, and the newly born. The faiths of Westeros mingled without envy. Septons and red priests, maesters and children of the forest, all found a place to speak or to listen as the need arose. There were, inevitably, shadows. Crops failed some years, and storms sometimes battered the coasts. In distant corners, new powers sometimes rose and threatened, but they met resistance not with armies, but with roads and alliances, with words and patience. When bandits harried the roads, Firesed's council dispatched teachers and healers first, warriors only when all else failed. The children who grew up in the shadow of dragons and under the care of bears became men and women, both fierce and merciful. Their lessons born of memory and hope alike. It was on a clear night, years into her stewardship, that Firesed stood with her students atop the schoolhouse observatory, pointing out the stars. She traced the arc of the dragon, the steady heart of the bear, the weeping sword of the north, and spoke softly of the stories written there, some old as stone, some new as the children's laughter below. She remembered, as she always did in those moments, the lessons Daenerys and Jorah had left behind. That history was not a chain, but a road, and every generation must choose its own path. The students listened, some thoughtful, some impatient, some already dreaming of travels yet to come. When the lesson ended, Fireseed lingered, gazing at the sweep of stars. She thought of Daenerys, who had come so far to build something lasting, of Jorah, who had found peace in teaching, of Drogon, whose breath still warmed the sea cliffs. She understood, perhaps better than any, that the work would never end, that peace was not an inheritance, but a practice. When she descended, the schoolhouse was quiet, its halls lined with painted banners and driftwood sculptures, every surface marked with the care and dreams of 100 hands. Firesed paused at the portrait of Daenerys, then at the cairn of Jorah. She laid her hand on the stones and whispered, "Thank you," as she had done since childhood. In distant valleys and on the sea, storms still gathered. But on Bear Island, and across the lands touched by the Dragon Road, lanterns burned bright against the dark. The memory of the bear and the dragon, their love and their hope, became a lamp passed from hand to hand, a light that kindled new songs, new learning, and the courage to shape the world as it must always be shaped, again and again and again, for those not yet born, for those long remembered, and for the endless day rising always beyond the edge of the known world. Wan Sha, Nagno Wan Dewey, and Rordi Ga. The patient pulse of generations, of lives growing, aging, and intertwining, became the foundation stone upon which the new Westeros rose. On Bear Island, in the years and then decades that followed Daenerys and Jorah's passing, each sunrise seemed to hold both the weight of what had come before, and the shimmering possibility of what still might be. Time moved at first, as a river swollen by spring thaw, carrying with it those who remembered the darkness, the wars, the endless snows and fires. Then it moved as a wide, slow current, meandering between meadows of peace and the quiet stones of memory. Bear Island's schoolhouse was at the heart of this transformation, a living archive as much as an academy. The stories of the bear and the dragon were not simply told but enacted, lived out through the actions and choices of each new generation. Children learned their letters by carving them into driftwood planks, their sums by counting out beans and shells gathered from the tide line, and their histories by sitting at the knees of those who still recalled Daenerys' laughter and Jorah's measured, gentle voice. The walls of the great hall became a mosaic of handprints and poems, of sketches in charcoal and faded ink, some retelling the old tales, others dreaming entirely new ones. Firesed grew older and stronger, her gold and copper hair streaked with the white of sea spray, her gaze steady and kind. She was as much at home on a ship's deck or beside a newborn foal as in council, and she cultivated in her students the restless curiosity that had marked her own youth. When disputes arose, over land or trade, or the tangle of marriage and kinship that always seemed to accompany peace as surely as war. She would call both parties to the schoolhouse, set bread and honey on the table, and bid them tell their stories, each in turn. More often than not, the solution emerged before the meal was finished. When it did not, Fireseed herself would mediate, her decisions trusted not only for their fairness, but because she listened first and longest. Each year brought the Festival of Fire, now celebrated in every corner of the realm. On Bear Island, the tradition was most beloved. Children and elders alike crafted effigies of dragons and bears, painting them in the brilliant reds, blacks, and whites of the old banners. By dusk, lanterns were hung in every window, and the beaches glowed with bonfires. Songs rose, new ones composed each year, mingled with the ancient ballads of the free folk and the soft, sweet harmonies of the summer isles. On the highest cliff, Fireseed would light the driftwood dragon, her silhouette outlined by its leaping flames. Sometimes, if the wind was right, Drogon's distant grandchildren, now wild, seldom seen, might be glimpsed as black shapes winging low above the trees, drawn by memory or simply the promise of fire. Peace was not always easy. Some winters were cruel, the wind knifing from the north with an edge sharp enough to remind the old of darker days. There were lean years, when the earth yielded little, or when a fever swept the children and every household held its breath for days and nights, listening for the sound of recovery or loss. Once, long after Sansa's time, a petty lord from the western shore tried to stir up old resentments, rallying a handful of malcontents, with talk of restoring the old order. But the council, now a seasoned gathering of men and women from across all the kingdoms, responded not with swords, but with envoys and open invitation. The would-be usurper found himself facing not an army but 1,000 patient voices, offering terms, hearing grievances, and weaving the angry knot of the past into something new. By spring he had become a magistrate, his anger softened by belonging. The Dragon Road by then was an artery of culture and learning as much as trade. Its wayhouses grew into thriving villages, its inns into marketplaces and places of learning. Tales traveled farther than coin, legends from distant Valyria, myths from the Summer Isles, the songs of Bravos, and the trickster stories of Skagos. Every few years, a new road was cut or a bridge repaired, and the children of Bear Island would send letters, sometimes tied to pigeons, sometimes by ship, to their friends across the world, eager for news and eager to share their own. In the Vale, the Eyrie opened its doors to scholars and merchants, its old towers ringing with laughter and argument. In the Reach, the great libraries of Old Town were rebuilt, their doors never closed, their halls echoing with debate and song. Dorne, once so fiercely insular, became the southern jewel of the road, its ports safe, its law tempered by a new code, its orchards laden with fruit and story alike. The Iron Islands, battered by wind and tide, found prosperity and peace, whaling, trading, their ships bearing not raiders but goods and ideas to distant lands. In time, even the last wild places of the north softened. Jon Snow, now simply called Jon of the Woods, his name whispered more often than seen, became a legend among both children and the old. Sometimes, a traveler lost on the tundra might find him by firelight, and in the morning, the path would be clear, food set aside, and Ghost's white fur vanishing into the mists. Each summer, Fireseed's council gathered on Bear Island for the midsummer moot. Delegates arrived by boat, road, and sometimes by air. On the rare occasion a dragon's descendant, tamed by one of Fireseed's kin, would permit a flight. The moot was a time of both celebration and debate. Songs were sung, games played, contests of wit and skill held beneath banners stitched with every color of the kingdoms. But also, each matter of policy and law, of trade and learning, was argued with as much passion as care. Young people, given their chance to speak, often surprised their elders with solutions no one else had dreamed. It was on one such evening, beneath a sky lit by aurora and bonfire, that Fireseed's own granddaughter, bright-eyed, sharp-tongued, a born listener, stood before the assembly and recited from memory the letter Daenerys had written so long ago, found hidden among Jorah's books. The world, in the end, is not changed by fire, nor kept whole by ice. It is mended by hands, scarred, calloused, gentle. If you remember this and teach others, then neither night nor storm, nor the memory of sorrow, will ever truly prevail. The words were met with a stillness deeper than silence, the hush of people remembering not only the price of peace, but the constant, necessary work of keeping it. And still, there were those who wished for adventure, who left Bear Island or Sunspear or Gulltown for the far reaches of the world. Some traveled to Yeti, others sailed with trading fleets to Southorios or the Summer Islands, a few even seeking the fabled remnants of old Valyria. Most returned, changed by what they saw, bringing with them new tales, new customs, new songs. Some did not return, their names carved into the wood of the schoolhouse or woven into the stories told by the fire. Drogon's line faded as all wild things do, but every so often, a fisherman off the coast of the Shield Islands or a shepherd in the hills above the Trident would swear they saw a great winged shadow pass overhead at dusk. Proof, some said, that magic, like peace, never vanished entirely, only changed its shape and place. Years built into centuries. The Bear and the Dragon became not only a story, but a principle, a way of living. Travelers to Bear Island, arriving by boat or by road, always found a place at table, a lesson to learn, and a story to share. The cairn overlooking the sea was tended by children, who might not have remembered the queen or her hand, but who understood what it meant to build, to mend, to forgive. And each spring the wildflowers bloomed brighter, as if to affirm the work was never wasted. Fire City lived long, long enough to see her great-grandchildren grown, to see the moot pass into hands she trusted, to see the last of her own generation pass from the world with dignity and song. When her time came, it was not marked by the fading of lights or the toll of bells, but by the planting of a new pine at the crest of the cairn, and the lighting of 1,000 lanterns on the water. Afterward, the world moved on. New stories rose, shaped by the lives of those whose names were not yet known. The schoolhouse, rebuilt twice more after storms and time, stood strong above the cliffs. Letters still traveled the Dragon Road. Old songs were sung and new ones composed, and each midsummer the fire blazed. The Bear and the Dragon entwined in flame and memory. If ever there was a time when war threatened, it was met with the collective will of a people trained in patience and learning, not in steel and terror. If there were losses, harvests ruined, ships foundered, loves lost, they were mourned, but not allowed to unravel the world. The lessons of the Bear and the Dragon, handed down like heirlooms, kept the road open, the fire burning, and the night forever at bay. In this way, the world endured, not perfect, but persistent, alive not in myth, but in the stubborn, quiet bravery of those who built and rebuilt, who chose day after day to tend the peace left in their care. And on the wind that swept Bear Island's cliffs, through wildflowers and the laughter of children, the echo of that choice remained, unbroken, into the ages beyond.